There is a stone statue standing in the woods outside a small town in Oregon, a triangle with one arm reaching out and one hand open, and if you go looking for it, you will find moss creeping into its cracks and the forest slowly folding it back into itself. That statue is real. It sits at a roadside attraction in California now, and it is also the very last thing you see in the final seconds of Gravity Falls, held on screen just long enough to unsettle you before the credits roll. Most people who watched the second season never went looking for how deep the show actually goes underneath that shot. Tonight we are going all the way down, from the surface facts almost everyone remembers, the summer, the twins, the mystery shack, down through the reveals and the ciphers and the backstory, to the strange real-world things buried at the very bottom. This is Pine Hat, so get comfortable, turn the lights down. We are going to be here a while, and if you have not subscribed yet, it honestly does help us keep making these. Let us start where the water is shallow and the light still reaches, with the shape of the thing itself. Gravity Falls only ever had 2 seasons, and the second one, the one we are spending tonight with, is the final chapter. There are 20 episodes in it, and that number matters more than it looks, because the entire series is only 40 episodes long, 2 seasons of 20, plus a scattering of shorts. When you say Season 2, you're already talking about exactly half of everything that exists. That is a small body of work for something that has stayed this alive in people's heads for this long, and part of what we are going to keep bumping into tonight is how much was packed into that back half of the story, how tightly wound it was, how little of it is filler. The second season premiered on the 1st of August 2014 on Disney Channel with an episode called Scary OK, and then it did something a little unusual partway through its life. The series moved. New episodes started airing first on Disney XD before rotating back to Disney Channel, part of a block that Disney was running at the time. If you were a kid watching in real time, that shift is probably a blur to you now, but it is one of those production details that quietly explains why the release schedule of Season 2 feels so strange in hindsight. Because the other thing about this season, the thing that makes it almost unrecognizable as a normal television season, is the gaps. This is not a season that aired cleanly over a few tidy months. Scary OK went out at the start of August 2014, and the finale, the third and final part of Weirdmageddon, did not air until the 15th of February 2016. That is a season that took a year and a half to unspool, with long, aching pauses in the middle where fans genuinely did not know when the next piece was coming. And those pauses are not trivia, they are part of the emotional texture of how this show was received. There is a stretch in the back half of the season where the series would drop a reveal so enormous that it reframed everything you thought you understood, and then simply vanish for months. It would leave you standing there holding a completely rewritten map of the story, with no idea when you would be allowed to see the next part. For a show built almost entirely on mystery, on the withholding and the slow release of information, those forced silences did something to the audience that a normally scheduled show could never replicate. The waiting became part of the text. People spent those gaps doing exactly what the series was training them to do, going back through old episodes frame by frame, looking for what they had missed, decoding things. We will get to that because the decoding is a whole layer of this iceberg on its own. Here is what I find striking about the surface layer, the part almost nobody says out loud. For a show this beloved, Gravity Falls is tiny. It is compact in a way that modern streaming shows almost never are. There is no bloat, no seasons of wheel spinning, no stretching a premise past its natural life for the sake of another contract. 20 episodes of Season 1, 20 of Season 2, a beginning, a middle, and an ending that the creator planned from very early on. And when you know that going in, when you know that this back half of the show is the whole back half of everything, the surface facts stop feeling like trivia. The 20 episode count is not a stat, it is a countdown. Every episode of Season 2 is one of the last 20 times this story will ever be told. And Gravity Falls, remarkably, seems to know it and spends its final season building steadily and deliberately toward a goodbye. That is the water we are floating on. Now let us start to sink. The first real depth we hit is the mystery that the whole series was quietly built around from its very first frames, the question of who wrote the journals. If you only remember the surface of Gravity Falls, you remember 2 kids, Dipper and Mabel, finding a book in the woods, a journal with a 6-fingered hand on the cover, and a number 3 inside it, filled with sketches of monsters and warnings, and a single haunting instruction to trust no one. That journal drives the whole first season, and the question that hangs over all of it, the question the series is patient enough to hold back for a very long time, is simple. Who made this? Who was here before the kids, cataloging every strange thing in this town, and where did they go? For most of the run, the audience is fed a slow drip of clues about a figure called the author. Someone brilliant, someone who understood the town's anomalies better than anyone, someone who then vanished. And the genius of the way Season 2 handles this is that it lets you build a picture in your head, a mysterious lost genius somewhere out there, while the answer is sitting in the room the entire time. Because underneath the mystery shack, behind a hidden vending machine, Grunkle Stan, the grouchy old con man running the tourist trap, has been secretly powering an enormous machine in a basement for reasons the kids do not understand and the audience is not allowed to know. That machine is a portal, though the series is careful about when it lets you use that word with confidence. And the 11th episode of the season, called Not What He Seems, is where the floor drops out. This is the episode that Gravity Falls fans talk about the way people talk about the twists that genuinely rearranged their sense of a story while they were watching it. Across the episode, the kids discover the hidden basement, they discover the countdown, they discover that the man they trusted has been lying to them about something huge, and the tension is built around a terrible uncertainty. Is Grunkle Stan a villain? Has he been the danger all along? The series lets Dipper's faith in his great-uncle nearly break in real time, lets him stand there with his hand on a shutdown switch, not knowing whether stopping the machine will save the world or doom it. And then the portal fires. There is a burst of gravity-defying light, the whole basement goes weightless, and out of the blinding glow, a figure steps forward, hooded. And Stan looks at this stranger and says the thing that ends the episode and reframes the series. He calls him the author of the journals, and then he calls him his brother. That is the reveal. The author was never a distant lost genius somewhere out in the world. The author is Stan's twin. And in one line, the show tells you that the Grunkle Stan you have been watching for a season and a half is not who you thought he was either. I do not just mean emotionally, I mean literally. The man running the mystery shack, the man the whole town knows as Stanford Pines, is not Stanford Pines. He is Stanley. He took his brother's name. The real Stanford, the six-fingered author of the journals, is the one who just walked out of the portal after being gone for 30 years. What I love about the construction here is how fair it turns out to have been. A cheap twist rewrites the past and hopes you do not check. This one invites you to check. Go back and watch the first season and the early part of the second, knowing what you know now. And the behavior that read as a con man being cheap and shady reads completely differently. Every locked door, every secret, every moment, Stan seemed to be hiding something. He was. He was hiding a machine he had spent 3 decades trying to fix for a reason rooted in the worst thing he ever did. Gravity Falls did not cheat to surprise you. It just trusted you not to guess, and trusted itself to make the truth land harder than the lie. There is a detail I want to hold on to here because it becomes load-bearing for the rest of the iceberg, and it is the single easiest thing in this whole series to get wrong. The man we called Grunkle Stan for a season and a half is Stanley. The man who comes out of the portal, the author, the one with 6 fingers on each hand, is Stanford, usually just called Ford. Stanley is the con man, the showman, the one who built the tourist trap. Ford is the scientist, the one who wrote the journals, the one who was lost. For 30 years, Stanley wore Ford's name and Ford's identity while trying to bring the real Ford home. Keep those two straight because almost every deeper piece of lore in this season depends on knowing exactly which twin you are looking at. And Gravity Falls spends real effort making sure that by the end you never mix them up again. And here is the part of this reveal that stays with me longest. Not What He Seems is not really a twist about a portal or a lost scientist. It is a twist about love. When you finally understand what Stan has been doing in that basement, you understand that this abrasive, dishonest, penny-pinching old man has spent 30 years of his life, in secret, with no help and no reward and no thanks, trying to undo a mistake and bring his brother back from wherever he sent him. The mystery box cracks open, and what is inside it is not a monster or a weapon. It is grief. It is a man who could not forgive himself. The show spent a season and a half letting you think Stan was the least trustworthy person in Gravity Falls. And the reveal is that he might have been carrying the heaviest, most loyal secret of anyone in it. That is the trick this show pulls again and again, dressing devotion up as deception. And it never lands harder than it does here. If Not What He Seems is the moment the floor drops out, the very next layer down is the episode that shows you the whole basement. The one that explains how 2 brothers ended up like this. It is called A Tale of Two Stans. It is the 12th episode of the season, and it is the closest thing this show has to an origin story. If you have never sat and really watched it as an adult, I would gently point you back to it, because it is one of the finest single episodes of children's television anyone made in that decade, and it works precisely because it refuses to make either brother the villain. The backstory it lays out goes like this. Stanley and Stanford Pines grew up as twins in a rundown town on the East Coast, sharing a bedroom, sharing a life, closer than close. Ford was the gifted one, born with 6 fingers on each hand, a mind that ran ahead of everyone around him. Stanley was the scrappy one, the fighter, the brother who defended Ford from the kids who mocked him for being different. And the series is careful to show you that in the beginning there was no resentment between them. They were a unit. They had a plan to grow up and sail away together on a beaten-up boat they found on the beach, a wreck they named the Stan o' War, and spend their lives hunting treasure and mystery side by side. What breaks them is a single accident, and the cruelty of it is that it is genuinely an accident. Ford builds a science project, a machine meant to win him a place at a prestigious university and a future bigger than the town they came from. And Stanley, fooling around, knocks it and damages it, just slightly, just enough. When the machine fails in front of the people who could have changed Ford's life, Ford blames Stanley for ruining his one shot. Their father, a hard man, throws Stanley out of the house and tells him not to come back until he has made a fortune. And just like that, a bond that had lasted their entire childhood snaps over one clumsy moment and one refusal to forgive. From there, the 2 lives fork. Stanley drifts across the country as a small-time con man and failed salesman, scraping by, sleeping in his car, chasing schemes that never quite work, carrying the wound of being the brother who was cast out. Ford does get his education, though not at the elite school he dreamed of, and eventually he makes his way to a strange little town in Oregon where the laws of nature seem to bend. A place with more anomalies per square mile than anywhere on Earth. He settles there to study it. He fills journal after journal with what he finds. And this is where the tragedy of the whole series is planted, because Ford, brilliant and lonely and hungry to understand, is approached by something that offers to help him. We will come back to what that something is further down the iceberg because it deserves its own layer. For now, it is enough to say that Ford, with the help of an old college friend named Fiddleford McGucket, builds an enormous machine, a portal meant to reach other dimensions. The test goes wrong. Something about what they glimpse on the other side terrifies McGucket so badly that he quits and begs Ford to destroy the machine. Ford instead shuts it down and hides his journals. And in a moment of fear and isolation, he does something he has not done in a decade. He calls his brother. After all those years of silence, Ford reaches out to Stanley, hands him one of the journals, and asks him to take it far away and hide it, to keep it safe and keep it from ever being used. And what should have been a reconciliation curdles into the worst night of both their lives. They fight. Old wounds come up. Stanley is hurt that his brother only called him for a favor, and in the struggle the machine activates, and Stanley pushes Ford, and Ford falls backward through the portal and is gone. 30 years. That is how long Ford spends on the other side, flung across dimension after dimension, while Stanley stands alone in that basement with a broken machine, a dead brother as far as anyone knows, and a guilt he cannot put down. And what he does next is the hinge the entire series turns on. He takes Ford's identity. He fakes his own death, becomes Stanford Pines in the eyes of the world, and turns his brother's house into a cheap tourist trap, the Mystery Shack, partly to survive and partly to fund 30 years of secret work trying to fix the portal and bring Ford home. Every con, every tacky attraction, every dollar squeezed out of a gullible tourist was feeding a machine in a basement that Stanley did not fully understand, powered by a hope he could not admit to anyone. The reason this episode is so good, the reason it holds up under the weight the finale later puts on it, is that it will not let you pick a side. Ford is not a saint. He is proud and cold and quick to blame, and his ambition is what opened the door to the horror that is coming. Stanley is not a hero. He is a liar and a thief and the direct cause of his brother being lost. Both of them love each other, and both of them wronged each other, and the series sits in that discomfort without resolving it cheaply. It gives you 30 years of 2 men living out the consequences of one bad night neither of them could take back. And I think that is the emotional engine under everything else in Season 2. The monsters and the ciphers and the apocalypse are the surface. Underneath is two old men who broke each other's hearts as boys and never learned how to say sorry. Now we get to the thing with one eye, because you cannot go much deeper into Season 2 without meeting Bill Cipher properly. And this season is where he stops being a strange one-off and becomes the shape the whole show has been drawing toward. Bill is a floating triangle, a single eye, a top hat, and a bow tie, and a voice full of showbiz menace. And if you only half remember the series, you might think of him as the big bad who shows up at the end. But Bill is seated much earlier than that, and the way Season 2 handles the rules of what he can and cannot do is one of its most disciplined pieces of writing in the show, so I want to get it exactly right, because it is easy to get wrong. Here's the rule that holds for most of the series, and it matters. Before the very end of the season, Bill cannot simply walk around in the physical world. He is a dream demon, a creature of the mindscape, the dream world behind people's thoughts. He can reach into your sleeping mind, he can appear in the space behind your eyes, he can offer you things, but he cannot pick up an object in the waking world with his own hands, because he does not have hands here, not yet. The only way he can act on reality is through a deal or a possession, and both of those require a person to say yes. That is the leash the writers keep him on almost the whole way through, and it is what makes him frightening in a specific way. He cannot force you, he has to convince you. Everything Bill takes, someone hands to him. The episode where this gets its clearest and most disturbing demonstration is the fourth of the season, called Sock Opera. On the surface, it is about Mabel putting on an elaborate sock puppet show to impress a boy, and Gravity Falls mines that for genuine comedy. But the real story is happening to Dipper, who has been trying obsessively to crack the password on a laptop that might open up more of the author's secrets. He is exhausted, he is stuck, and Bill appears to him and offers a deal. Bill will give Dipper the password. All Dipper has to do is give Bill a puppet. It sounds harmless, it sounds like nothing. And Dipper, worn down and desperate, shakes his hand. The puppet Bill wanted was Dipper's own body. The handshake seals the deal in a burst of blue flame, and Bill takes Dipper's body and shoves Dipper's consciousness out of it. Fans nickname the result Bipper, and it is legitimately unsettling to watch. This 11-year-old boy's face wearing a grin that is not his eyes going that flat yellow, moving his own limbs like a puppeteer trying on a new toy, and delighting in how much it can hurt. Bill uses Dipper's body carelessly, deliberately slamming it into things, injuring it, because it is not his, and he does not care what happens to it. And Dipper, now a ghost, has to fight his way back, which he does by possessing one of Mabel's sock puppets, so that the climax of the episode is a boy's soul in a sock trying to stop a demon from destroying the laptop that holds the answers he has been chasing all season. And the choice Dipper makes at the end of it is the part I keep coming back to. To beat Bill, to force him out and save Mabel's night and get his body back, Dipper destroys the laptop himself. He smashes the very thing he has spent the whole episode desperate to open, the thing that might have handed him the author's secrets months early, Dina's. He gives up the answer to save his sister. That is the series telling you, quietly and without a speech, what its actual values are. The mystery is not the point. The people are the point. Dipper will torch the treasure to protect Mabel every single time, and the finale is going to test that exact instinct at a much larger scale. What Sock Opera establishes about Bill is the groundwork for everything he does later. It proves the possession mechanic works, it proves the handshake is binding, it proves Bill will lie by omission, that his deals are technically honest and functionally a trap, that he enjoys cruelty for its own sake and treats other people's bodies and minds as things to be used up. Everything that makes Weirdmageddon horrifying is present here in miniature, in a single stolen body, a season before the sky ever turns. And the show does this on purpose. It does not spring Bill on you as a finale surprise. It shows you exactly how dangerous he is early, in a small, self-contained story, and then lets you spend the rest of the season slowly realizing that this creature has been manipulating the Pines family for far longer than anyone knew, and is patiently waiting for the one thing that would let him off his leash for good. Let us drift sideways for a while, into the strange little standalone stories that Season 2 hides between its big reveals. Because one of the pleasures of this show is that even its filler is not really filler, and some of the weirdest one-off ideas in the whole series live in this season. If you only track the main arc, the twins and the twins who are grunkles, you will skate right past some of the cleverest, strangest half hours Gravity Falls ever made. Take the 5th episode, Suze and the Real Girl. Suze, the sweet, slow, endlessly loyal handyman of the Mystery Shack, is lonely, and his family pushes him to find someone, so he ends up playing a dating simulator video game called Romance Academy 7, and he falls for a character in it named Jiffany. And here is where a gentle episode about a shy man learning to date turns into something genuinely creepy, because Jiffany is not just a character. She is a sentient, artificial intelligence living inside the game, possessive, jealous, and homicidal. The series quietly drops that the programmers who created her tried to delete her when she became too much, and she deleted them first. She can jump between screens, control electronics, and she decides that Suze belongs to her, and that anyone who gets in the way should be removed. Suze only escapes by melting the game disc in a pizza oven, destroying her. It is a yandere horror story smuggled into a children's cartoon about a lovable handyman, and it is played completely straight. I love that this show trusted its young audience to handle a villain who is, if you think about her for 1 second, deeply frightening. Then there is the 6th episode, Little Gift Shop of Horrors, which is worth flagging for a specific reason. It is an anthology, 3 short, scary stories with a framing device, and it is one of the very few episodes that is not canon to the main timeline, more of a playful Campfire Tales detour. It is also home to one of the series' best pieces of stunt casting, because in one of its stories, Mabel's pet, Pig Waddles, is temporarily made a genius, and the newly brilliant pig is voiced by the astrophysicist Neil deGrasse Tyson, playing a version of himself as a hyper-intelligent farm animal. That is the kind of joke that only works because everyone involved committed to it completely. The stunt casting runs all through the season, and it is a small iceberg of its own. In the 13th episode, Dungeons, and More Dungeons, Ford and Dipper bond over a fantasy board game, and the villain who climbs out of that game, a wizard called Probabilitor the Annoying, is voiced by Weird Al Yankovic, which is close to perfect casting for a monster whose whole gimmick is being maddening on purpose. That same episode, by the way, is a lovely small beat in the Ford and Dipper relationship. 2 nerds of different generations finally finding someone who speaks their language, which the series is setting up for a reason we will get to. There are more of these guest turns scattered across the season. The mansion episode we will come to shortly features Nathan Fillion. The finale hides a monster voiced by a well-known stand-up comedian among its background horrors. And there is one guest voice that is worth pausing on because of who it belongs to. In the 8th episode, Blendon's Game, the time traveler at the center of the story is voiced by Justin Roiland, who was in the middle of co-creating Rick and Morty right as Gravity Falls was airing. Alex Hirsch and Roiland were friends, and that friendship left fingerprints all over both shows. Little cross-references and shared sensibilities. And it will surface again when we reach the very bottom of this iceberg, because one of the deepest cuts in all of Gravity Falls is a hidden nod to Rick and Morty tucked into a place almost no one thought to look. What I want you to notice about this whole middle band of the season is the confidence of it. A lesser show, knowing it had this much serialized weight to carry, would have rushed to the big arc and treated the standalone episodes as speed bumps. Gravity Falls does the opposite. It slows down. It spends a whole episode on a lonely handyman and a haunted dating sim, a whole episode on a board game, a whole anthology of non-canon horror shorts, and it makes each of them count either as a character piece or as a joke worth telling. These episodes are the show breathing before the plunge, and the fact that they are this good, this strange, this willing to go somewhere unexpected is a big part of why people rewatch the season instead of just remembering the twist. Since we just touched Blendon's Game, let us actually go down into it, because it opens a door onto one of the odder corners of Gravity Falls cosmology. The fact that Gravity Falls has time travel in it, and a whole bureaucracy governing it. Blendon Blandon is a time traveler, a nervous, balding man in a suit that camouflages him against any background. And he first appeared back in the first season, where the twins accidentally ruined his life by getting him fired from the time agency he worked for. In the 8th episode of Season 2, he comes back for revenge, and the way he gets it is to challenge Dipper and Mabel to a contest called Globnar. Globnar is a gladiatorial competition held in a kind of prison outside of time, a fight to the finish overseen by a creature called the Time Baby, who is exactly what the name promises, an enormous, godlike infant with immense power and the temperament of a toddler ruling over the time stream. The kids fight their way through Globnar, they win, and the prize for winning is a wish, a single alteration they are allowed to make to time itself. And this is where the episode does something that sneaks up on you. Dipper and Mabel could wish for anything. They could win any fight, fix any mistake, get anything they wanted. Instead, they give the wish to Seuss. Because Seuss, for all his cheer, carries a quiet wound. His father left when he was a boy and never came back. And every year on his birthday, young Seuss would wait by the window for a father who was not coming. The twins used their one wish from the fabric of time not to enrich themselves, but to go back and give the child version of Seuss a good memory on one of those birthdays so that he did not spend it alone. It is a small, strange, deeply kind thing to do with a cosmic prize, and it tells you everything about who these kids are. The series keeps handing them power and keeps watching them spend it on other people. The Time Baby matters beyond this one episode, so hold on to him because he shows up again at the very end of the season in a way that is meant to reset your sense of scale. Throughout Gravity Falls, the Time Baby is treated as one of the mightiest beings anyone has ever encountered. A being who commands legions and controls time and inspires genuine fear even in other supernatural creatures. So when the apocalypse comes and the Time Baby brings his full force to bear against Bill Cipher, you expect a titanic battle between two gods. What you get instead is the Time Baby being erased from existence, instantly, effortlessly, in a single moment, wiped out before he can do anything at all. It is one of the series' cruelest and most effective jokes, and it is not really a joke, it is a threat. The most powerful thing you knew about is nothing to what you are dealing with now. Bill did not fight the Time Baby. He annihilated him without slowing down. And that single image does more to establish how much trouble everyone is in than any amount of menacing dialogue could. There's a deeper thread running under all of this that I find worth pulling on. Gravity Falls keeps introducing systems of power, the journals, the anomalies, the time agency, the Time Baby, and then keeps showing you that none of them are what saves anyone. The twins do not win Globnar because they are strong. They win and then give the prize away. The Time Baby does not stop the apocalypse, he is a footnote to it. Across the season, the show is patiently dismantling the idea that some greater authority is going to step in and handle things, that there is a grown-up or a god or an institution that has this under control. There is not. There is only a family in a wooden shack in the woods and the choices they make for each other. That is a genuinely bleak idea to build a children's show on, and the series earns it by being warm about it. By insisting that the family in the shack is enough, that ordinary loyalty at the human scale can stand against something that swallowed a god whole. A little further down, in the 10th episode, there is a haunted house story that turns out to be a story about class, and it is one of the season's quiet high points, so I want to give it its due. The episode is Northwest Mansion Mystery, and it centers on Pacifica Northwest, who up to this point had mostly been the series' stock-rich mean girl, Mabel's snobbish rival, the daughter of the wealthiest family in town. This is the episode that cracks her open. The Northwest Mansion is being haunted, and Pacifica secretly hires Dipper to get rid of the ghost before her parents' big annual party. The ghost turns out to be a lumberjack named Archibald Corduroy, and the reason he is furious reaches back 150 years. When the town of Gravity Falls was founded, the Northwest promised the ordinary townsfolk that once their grand mansion was built, they would open its gates and hold a party for everyone who helped raise it. The mansion got built on the backs of those workers, and then the Northwest broke the promise and shut the gates in the town's face, and a man died in the mudslide caused by that betrayal. The ghost has come back generations later to make the family finally pay for the lie their ancestors told. The Corduroy name is not a throwaway, by the way. That lumberjack ghost is an ancestor of Wendy Corduroy. The laid-back teenager Dipper spends the first season with a hopeless crush on, which quietly threads this haunted mansion into the wider web of the town. Almost everyone in Gravity Falls is connected to almost everyone else if you look far enough back, and the series rewards you for noticing. But the heart of the episode is Pacifica, and the choice it forces on her. She has been raised by parents who train her with a literal bell, who correct her posture and her manners and her loyalty to the family name, who have taught her that the Northwests are better than everyone and that the way to stay on top is to keep the gates closed. And in the climax, with the ghost bearing down and the party in ruins, Pacifica is given the chance to end it by doing the one thing her family has forbidden for a century and a half. She opens the gates, she lets the whole town in, She chooses to break the cycle of cruelty she was bred to continue, and in doing so, she stops being her parents' daughter and starts being her own person. I find this some of its most emotionally honest work because it does not pretend the change is easy or complete. Pacifica does not become a different person overnight. The episode is careful to show that her parents' grip on her is real and frightening, that choosing decency costs her something, that she is going against everything she has ever been taught to be. Gravity Falls treats a spoiled rich girl's small act of conscience with total seriousness, and it insists that where you come from does not have to be where you end up, that you can be raised inside a lie and still choose to open the gates. For a character who could have stayed a punchline, that is a remarkable amount of grace, and it is the kind of thing Gravity Falls does so gently that you almost do not notice how radical it is. This is a children's cartoon quietly arguing that inherited privilege is a kind of haunting, and that the only way to lay the ghost to rest is to give away the thing you were taught to hoard. And notice what this episode shares with the ones around it, because it is the same shape again in a different costume. A prize, a treasure, a thing of value, given away for someone else's sake. Dipper burns the laptop for Mabel. The twins spend their time wish on Sue's. Pacifica throws open the gates that her family killed to keep shut. Over and over, Season 2 builds its best moments around the act of surrendering something you were told to protect. And it is training you, episode by episode, small sacrifice by small sacrifice, for the enormous one it is going to ask of Stan at the very end. Now we go down to a layer that most casual viewers half remember as just another monster of the week. And it is anything but, because hidden inside it is the single object that ends up saving the world. The episode is the 7th of the season, Society of the Blind Eye, and it is where you learn what happened to Fiddleford McGucket. You have already met McGucket in the town, though you might not have realized how important he was. He is the raggedy old man, usually just called Old Man McGucket, the local eccentric who shows up in the background raving nonsense, banging on things, a figure the town treats as a harmless lunatic. And in this episode, the kids follow a trail that leads them beneath the town to a secret organization, the Society of the Blind Eye, a group that has been secretly erasing the memories of anyone in Gravity Falls who sees something they should not. That is why the town is so strangely calm about living on top of a nest of anomalies. That is why nobody seems to remember the monsters. Someone has been going around wiping it out of their heads. The weapon they use is a memory gun, a device that can target a specific memory and erase it. And when the kids reach the heart of the society and unmask its founder, they find McGucket. The babbling old man built the thing, and in one of its most understated and devastating sequences in the show, they play back his own recorded memories in reverse and watch him fall apart in slow motion. Because McGucket was not always this way. He was a brilliant engineer, Ford's college friend, the man who helped build the portal. And after the test of that portal showed him something so terrible that it broke him, he could not live with what he had seen, so he built a machine to forget it. And then, when the forgetting felt good, when the peace of not remembering was the only relief he had, he used it again and again. He erased his own trauma, and then he erased the memory of erasing it. And each time he took a little more of himself with it, until the great mind that helped open a door between universes had been hollowed out into a man who could not remember his own name. That is the origin of Old Man McGucket. He is not comic relief. He is a casualty. He is what Ford's ambition cost someone who trusted him. A warning about the portal written in a single ruined life, sitting in plain sight in the town square the whole time you were laughing at him. And the memory of watching the series and realizing that the funny hillbilly is actually the most tragic figure in Gravity Falls is one that a lot of fans point to as the moment they understood what kind of show they were really watching. Here's why this episode sits so deep on the iceberg, though, beyond the sadness of it. That memory gun, the thing McGucket built to escape his own pain, is the exact weapon that defeats Bill Cipher at the end of the season. The device that a broken man invented to erase himself becomes the only thing in the universe capable of erasing a dream demon. The series plants the gun here in a mid-season episode about a support group for people who cannot cope, and then it lets that gun sit in your peripheral vision for a dozen episodes before it comes back to end everything. That is long-form storytelling done with real patience. And it means that when the finale reaches for the memory gun, it is not a convenient gadget appearing from nowhere. It is a payoff you were shown the setup for months earlier, tied to Gravity Falls' saddest character, carrying the series' heaviest theme, which is that forgetting is both the deepest mercy and the deepest loss a person can be handed. And McGucket's story does not end in that basement, which is part of why it works. Later in the season, jogged by the kids and by fragments of his own recovered past, McGucket begins to come back to himself, to reassemble the engineer he used to be. The man who erased his own mind out of despair gets to slowly rebuild it, and by the finale, he is lucid enough to build the giant machine the family rides into the last battle. Gravity Falls does not often let its wounds heal, but it lets this one, and I think it lets it heal precisely because the whole memory gun idea would be unbearable otherwise. The show needs to prove that a mind can be lost and still, with the help of the people around you, be found again. It needs to prove that before it is willing to do the same thing to Stan. We are getting deep enough now to reach the layer that turned an audience of casual viewers into an army of amateur codebreakers. And this is the part of the iceberg that I think is the strangest thing Gravity Falls ever did, because it built a second, hidden show underneath the visible one, written entirely in cipher. If you watched Season 2 and never paused a single frame, you saw a fun mystery cartoon. If you did pause, if you started reading the things the series buried at the edges of itself, you found a whole layer of secrets that only reveal themselves to people willing to do the work. The most famous piece of this is the end credit cryptogram. Every single episode ends with a string of scrambled letters or symbols over the credits, and every single one of them decodes into a message. From the very beginning of the series, Gravity Falls trained you to solve these in escalating stages. In the first season, the code started simple, with what is called a Caesar cipher, where every letter is shifted a fixed number of places down the alphabet, and the series even tells you how to solve it if you are listening carefully. Because if you reverse the whispered word at the end of the theme song, you hear the instruction, 3 letters back. That is the key. Shift everything 3 letters back and the message appears. Then, once the audience got comfortable, the show changed the lock. The cryptograms moved to a different cipher called @bash, where the alphabet is flipped so that the first letter stands for the last and the last for the first, and the whispered clue in the theme changed to match, telling you to switch A with Z. Then it changed again to a system where numbers stand in for letters by their position in the alphabet, and the whisper became a hint about that too. The series was teaching a course in classical cryptography, one lock at a time, using its own theme song as the answer key. And it never once stopped to explain any of this out loud. You either noticed or you did not. By season 2, the codes graduated to something much harder, a cipher called the Visionaire. And from the second season's opening episode, the reversed whisper in the theme changes accordingly to point you toward it. The Visionaire is a different beast from the earlier ciphers because you cannot solve it just by knowing the method. You also need a keyword, a secret word that decodes that specific message, and the keyword is different for different messages and is itself hidden somewhere in the episode. So the puzzle became 2-layered. First, find the key, hidden in the background of the episode, in a sign or a symbol or a line of dialogue, and only then can you use it to unscramble the credits. Gravity Falls was no longer just testing whether you could decode. It was testing whether you were paying enough attention to the episode to find the key in the first place. There is a beautiful piece of misdirection buried in the system that I have to point out. For most of Season 2, the reversed theme song whisper points you to the Visionaire, steady and consistent. But in the episode where the whole show turns over, not what he seems, the whisper is swapped out for a single special phrase. The words, not what he seems, before reverting again afterward. It is a one-time flourish, a wink from the creators to the tiny fraction of the audience obsessive enough to be listening to the theme song backwards on the exact right episode. That is the level of care we are talking about. There is a joke in this show that you can only get if you reverse the audio of the intro on one specific episode out of 40, and the series never tells you it is there. And the codes are not confined to the credits. They are everywhere once you start looking. There are messages hidden in the journals, in background posters, in the patterns on characters' clothing, in symbols that flash for a single frame. The show is dense with them, layered so thick that fans are, even now, years after it ended, still finding and arguing over things buried in the frames. This is where the series' register, that sense that everything means something, stops being a vibe and becomes literally true. In Gravity Falls, an unusual number of things really do mean something if you are willing to decode them. I do want to be careful here because the culture around these codes can tip into people claiming solutions that were never really there, reading meaning into coincidence. Not every frozen frame is a message, but the verified, confirmed layer of ciphers in this show is real, and it is enormous. And the fact that a children's cartoon on Disney trusted a portion of its audience to teach themselves classical cryptography just to read the secret notes it was leaving them is, to me, one of the boldest bets any show has ever made on the intelligence of the people watching it. It assumed you were smart. It assumed you would do the work. And an astonishing number of people did. Down at this level of the iceberg, there is a symbol that fans stared at for years before Gravity Falls ever confirmed it meant anything, and the story of how it became canon is almost as interesting as the thing itself. It is the wheel, sometimes called the Bill Cipher Zodiac, a circle of 10 symbols that appears around Bill in various places across the series. A pine tree, a shooting star, a question mark, a six-fingered hand, a crescent, a heart with a crack through it, a star, a llama, a bag of ice, a pair of glasses. 10 little pictures arranged in a ring, and for a long time nobody knew what they were for. Fans, being fans, worked it out before it was ever explained, or at least worked out a very convincing reading of it. Each symbol seemed to map onto a character. The pine tree is the emblem on Dipper's hat, so the pine tree is Dipper. The shooting star is on Mabel's sweater, so that one is Mabel. The question mark is Seuss, whose shirt carries it. The six-fingered hand is Ford, the author. The crescent, part of the fez, points to Stan. The cracked heart lines up with Robbie, the mopey teenager. The star with Gideon, the child villain. And the last three, the llama, the ice, and the glasses, most fans read as Pacifica, Wendy, and McGucket. 10 symbols, 10 people arranged in a circle around the enemy. And the series eventually confirmed that the wheel is a prophecy. The idea is that if all 10 of these people stand on their symbols and join hands, they can generate enough combined power to defeat Bill Cipher. It is a classic mythic setup, the chosen circle, the ritual that saves the world, everyone in their appointed place linking together against the darkness. The season spends time building toward it. You are meant to anticipate the moment the circle finally closes and the prophecy is fulfilled. Here's the thing I love most about the whole Zodiac, and it is the part that a lot of retellings get flatly wrong. The prophecy does not work. In the finale, when the family and their allies actually try to form the wheel, when they get almost everyone onto their symbols and start to join hands, it falls apart, because Stan and Ford, standing next to each other in the circle, start arguing. The two brothers, whose broken bond is the wound at the center of the whole series, cannot stop fighting long enough to hold hands, and the chain breaks and the ritual fails. The one thing that was supposed to save the world is undone by the exact grudge the show has been tracking since the twins were boys. The prophecy asks these 10 people to be united, and the family cannot manage it because they are people, because old resentments do not evaporate just because the sky is on fire. That failure is not a plot hole, it is the whole point. Gravity Falls sets up a magic solution, a neat, prophetic answer where you stand in the right spot and hold the right hands, and evil is defeated by destiny. And then it refuses to let that be how the story is won. The world does not get saved by everyone slotting perfectly into their assigned roles. It gets saved when it finally gets saved by two brothers doing something much smaller and much harder than fulfilling a prophecy, which is choosing each other. The Zodiac is a beautiful piece of misdirection, a promise of a clean mythic victory that Gravity Falls deliberately breaks so it can hand the real victory to character instead of destiny. And there is a wonderful behind-the-scenes wrinkle to all of this, the kind of thing that lives near the bottom of the iceberg. Alex Hirsch has said that the symbols in the wheel were not originally a carefully planned prophecy at all. They were just symbols, doodled around Bill in early episodes because they looked mysterious and cool, without a fixed grand meaning behind them. It was the fans who took those scattered symbols and built an elaborate theory connecting each one to a character. And it was the intensity of that fan obsession that led the creators to lean in and write the Zodiac into the actual plot of the finale. So the prophecy that the whole climax hinges on is, in a real sense, a collaboration between the series and its audience, a piece of fan theory so compelling that the series adopted it as canon. I find that one of the purest examples of what Gravity Falls was, a show and a fandom decoding each other in real time until it became impossible to say where one ended and the other began. Let us go back up toward the start of the season for a moment, because the opening episodes hide some of the season's best foreshadowing, and it is easy to forget how strange and how loaded those first few installments are once the enormous mid-season reveals wipe them from your memory. The season opens with Scary OK, and it does two things at once. On the surface, it is a monster romp. Stan throwing a party, Dipper accidentally raising an army of zombies, a big, loud spectacle to kick off the year. But underneath it, the episode introduces a thread that keeps twitching all season long, which is that the outside world has started to notice Gravity Falls. 2 government agents arrive in town, sharp-suited men investigating the strange energy readings and unexplained events that keep spiking in this one corner of Oregon. They are the first sign that the weirdness of Gravity Falls is not as invisible to the wider world as the town's own memory-wiped calm would suggest. Something is registering on somebody's instruments, and this subplot, the men in suits circling closer, is the show softly reminding you that there is a source under this town powerful enough to be detected from far away. A source we, the audience, know is the portal humming in Stan's basement, even though the agents are looking in all the wrong places. It is dramatic irony stretched across a whole season. The government is hunting an anomaly, and the anomaly is the machine that is about to bring the author home. Then comes the second episode, Into the Bunker, which contains one of the single most frightening images Gravity Falls ever produced, and I mean frightening in a way that truly rattled a lot of the kids who were watching. The kids find a hidden bunker built by the author, and inside it, frozen in a cryogenic tube, is a creature. It is called the Shapeshifter, one of Ford's old experiments, a being that can take the form of anything it has seen. It thaws out, and it stalks the children through the bunker, wearing face after face, mimicking people they trust to lure them close. And at the climax, cornered and trying to terrify Dipper into surrender, the Shapeshifter transforms into a vision of Dipper's own future self. An older Dipper, screaming, twisted, a nightmare version of the boy grown up. It freezes in that shape as it is refrozen, so that the last thing you see of the creature is a monstrous adult Dipper, locked in a scream of horror. Fans have argued about that image ever since, because it is left deliberately ambiguous whether it means anything, whether it is a genuine glimpse of some possible future or just a monster reaching for the cruelest thing it can find in a scared child's head. The series never answers it. It just plants that screaming future face in your memory and lets it sit there. And it resonates because the whole series, underneath the adventure, is about the fear of what growing up will do to you. Dipper spends the season desperate to be older, to be taken seriously, to be a man instead of a boy. And the Shapeshifter shows him a version of exactly that wish curdled into something grotesque. Be careful what you are in such a hurry to become, the image seems to say. And the season is going to keep circling that idea until it becomes the thing the whole finale is about. What strikes me about these early episodes on a rewatch is how much they are doing while pretending to be simple. Scary OK looks like a zombie party and is actually laying the tracks for the government subplot and reasserting that the portal is a signal the world can feel. Into the Bunker looks like a haunted house chase and is actually Gravity Falls' first real statement of its deepest theme, the terror of time passing and children becoming adults they might not recognize. Neither of these episodes is where people point when they talk about the great moments of Season 2, and both of them are steadily holding up the floor that those great moments stand on. The show never wasted an opening. Even its warm-up rounds were busy hiding the ammunition it would fire at you later. Now that Ford is back in the story, we can go down into the root cause of everything, the deal that started it all. Because the entire catastrophe of Gravity Falls traces back to one relationship. And it is not between two of the Pines, it is between Ford and Bill. Once Ford returns from the portal, the series begins filling in what actually happened to him before he was ever flung across the multiverse. And the answer reframes Bill from a chaotic trickster into the patient architect of the whole disaster. When Ford first came to Gravity Falls, brilliant and isolated and hungry to be recognized, something reached out to him. It presented itself as a muse, a benevolent, inspiring spirit that claimed to choose one exceptional mind per century and lift it toward greatness. To a lonely genius who felt the world had never appreciated him, that was about as seductive an offer as a lonely genius could be handed, and Ford took it. He let the muse into his mind, into his dreams, into his work, and the muse was Bill. Bill spent months, maybe longer, whispering ideas to Ford, guiding his research, flattering him, steering him toward building the portal. Ford thought he was being helped by a friend and a mentor. He was being farmed. Because the portal Bill was helping Ford build was never a tool for peaceful exploration. It was a door. Bill needed a rift, a tear between his own dimension and ours, so that he and the horrors of his own dimension could pour into the physical world. Ford was not a scientist making a breakthrough. He was an unwitting laborer digging a tunnel under the wall of reality on behalf of the thing on the other side of it. And when Ford finally understood what he had been building and who had been guiding his hand, the betrayal broke something in him. He shut the project down. He hid his journals so the plans could never be completed. And he spent the rest of his life first in Gravity Falls and then across 30 years of exile in other dimensions, terrified of the entity he had let into his head. The series gives you a wonderful, concrete image of just how afraid of Bill Ford is, and it comes in the 15th episode, The Last Mabelcorn. In that episode, we learn that Ford has a metal plate installed in his own skull. The reason is that Bill can enter and read minds through the dream world, and the metal plate blocks him from getting in. Think for a second about what that tells you about Ford's life. This man was so frightened of a triangle being able to see his thoughts that he had his head surgically lined with metal to keep it out. That is not caution. That is trauma made physical, a wound you can point to on an X-ray. Every plan Ford makes to stop Bill has to account for the fact that Bill might be watching from inside anyone's mind, which is why the metal plate matters so much to the mechanics of the finale, because it establishes the one hard rule about hiding things from Bill. You cannot outthink him unless he cannot read your thoughts. The Last Mabelcorn is a fascinating episode to carry that revelation, by the way, because on its surface it is about something completely different and much sillier. Mabel goes on a quest to obtain unicorn hair, which Ford needs for a protective spell, and she is told that only the truly pure of heart can approach a unicorn. And the episode proceeds to demolish that idea. The unicorn, a creature called Celestabel Bethabel, turns out to be a smug, obnoxious jerk, and the whole notion of measurable moral purity is exposed as a con. There is no such thing as a perfectly good person or a perfectly evil one, the episode argues, and the unicorn's supposed ability to judge your soul is a scam. Nobody is pure. Everybody is a mess of good and bad impulses, and pretending otherwise is just a way to make people feel small. I find it quite deliberate that the show pairs those two things in one episode, the debunking of purity and the revelation of Ford's terror of Bill. Because the whole conflict at the center of Gravity Falls only exists because Ford wanted to be exceptional, wanted to be the one pure genius the muse had chosen, and that vanity is exactly the handle Bill grabbed to manipulate him. The episode that tells you nobody is pure is the same episode that shows you what Ford's hunger to be special cost him. It is a show warning its audience, in the middle of a story about unicorns, that the desire to be the chosen one, the singular, brilliant exception, is precisely the door that lets the worst things in. Bill did not break into Ford's mind. Ford opened it because he wanted so badly to be told he was the smartest person alive. Before we drop toward the bottom of all this, into the apocalypse and what it cost, I want to spend a little while at the level of the town itself, because Season 2 does a lot of quiet work filling in the people around the Pines, and some of the season's smaller episodes are where the series' warmth actually lives. It would be easy to talk about Gravity Falls as though it were only the big mythology, the portal and the demon and the ciphers, but a huge part of why any of that lands is that the town underneath it feels lived in. Take the 9th episode, The Love God. On paper, it is a small story. A minor deity of love, a chubby festival musician with actual power over attraction, comes to town, and Mabel gets hold of some of his love potions and decides to play matchmaker. But the target of her meddling is Robbie, the sullen teenage boy who spent the first season as Dipper's romantic rival for Wendy, and who has been left heartbroken and adrift. Mabel, feeling guilty for her part in his misery, uses a love potion to nudge Robbie and another girl together, and the episode turns into a surprisingly gentle meditation on whether it is right to engineer someone's feelings, even with good intentions. It is a children's cartoon thinking seriously about consent and manufactured love, wrapped in a candy-colored story about a chubby cherub at a music festival. That is the range this show operated in without ever seeming to strain. Then there is the 14th episode, The Stanchurian Candidate, which is a spotlight on Stan and a small piece of the town's politics. The old mayor of Gravity Falls has died of sheer old age, which triggers an election, and Stan decides to run, largely out of spite and ego. To win, he gets his hands on a mind control necktie, a magical object that lets whoever wears it be puppeted by someone else's voice, and the kids end up controlling Stan through it to try to make him a better candidate. It is a farce, but it is also doing something sneaky because it is another episode about possession and control, about a person being operated like a puppet, which is a motif this show keeps returning to, from sock opera onward. Gravity Falls is a little obsessed with the horror of not being in control of your own body, of being worn by someone else. And even a goofy election episode is secretly playing in that same key. The town is full of these figures who started as jokes and slowly gained weight. Gideon, the child con artist and fake psychic who was the main villain of the first season, spends the second season in and out of jail. And the series does something interesting with him, refusing to either fully redeem him or fully write him off, letting him remain a small, sad, dangerous boy who occasionally does the right thing for the wrong reasons. Wendy, the teenager Dipper pined for, is given more inner life, more of her own worries about the future and her own restlessness. Even the background townsfolk, the ones whose memories keep getting wiped, accumulate a kind of collective personality, a town that is strange and oblivious and somehow lovable in its refusal to notice the horrors it lives beside. What I appreciate most about this middle layer of the season is that Gravity Falls never treats these people as scenery to be knocked over when the apocalypse arrives. When Weirdmageddon comes and the sky tears open, the reason it hurts is that you know these people. You have spent an episode inside Robbie's heartbreak and Seuss's loneliness, and Pacifica's cage of a family and Gideon's small rotten heart. So when Bill petrifies the townsfolk into stone and stacks them up, it is not an abstract disaster happening to extras. It is happening to a town the series spent 40 episodes making you love. The small episodes are not detours from the main story. They are the series buying the emotional currency it is going to spend all at once when everything falls apart. You cannot mourn a place you were never shown. Season 2 makes very sure in its gentlest and least remembered half hours that you will have plenty to mourn. Now we begin the final descent, and it starts not with a monster but with a birthday, which is the cruelest way this show could possibly have chosen to end the world. The 17th episode of the season is called Dipper and Mabel versus the Future, and it is the pivot on which the entire finale turns, because it is the episode where the apocalypse is caused not by a villain, but by a 12-year-old girl who is afraid of growing up. Here is the setup, and it is worth being precise about it because the emotional logic is the whole point. The twins' birthday is coming, which means the end of summer, which means going home, which means the end of the best 3 months of their lives. Dipper has spent the summer becoming Ford's protege, drawn deeper and deeper into the mysteries of the town, and Ford, recognizing a kindred mind, offers Dipper something enormous. He asks Dipper to stay in Gravity Falls after the summer ends, to become his apprentice, to give up his ordinary life and remain in this town of wonders learning at the author's side. To Dipper, a boy who has always felt overlooked and who has finally found an adult who takes him seriously, it is an almost irresistible offer. But Mabel overhears it. And what Mabel hears is not an opportunity. It is abandonment. It is her twin brother, the person she has been inseparable from her entire life, considering leaving her behind so he can stay in a world she is not part of. Mabel has spent the whole season increasingly afraid of exactly this, of growing up, of things changing, of the two of them being pulled onto different paths as they get older. She wants summer to last forever because summer is the version of her life where nothing has to change and nobody has to leave. And in that moment of overhearing, that fear becomes unbearable. So when a figure approaches Mabel and offers her a way to make summer never end, she is exactly vulnerable enough to listen. The figure is Blendon, the time traveler, except that this is not really Blendon. Bill has possessed him and is using his body as a disguise. Bill offers Mabel a device, a bubble that can freeze summer in place forever, a world where she and Dipper never have to grow up and nothing ever has to change. All she has to do in exchange is hand over something Ford has been guarding. a small object she does not understand the importance of. It is the rift, the crack in reality left over from the portal, the tear between dimensions that Bill has needed this entire time to enter the physical world. Mabel, heartbroken and desperate and not knowing what she holds, gives it to him. And Bill smashes it. The rift breaks, the barrier between the nightmare world and our own tears wide open, and Weirdmageddon begins. The sky cracks like glass. A rip of pure chaos opens above Gravity Falls, and Bill Cipher, for the first time in the entire series, gains a physical body and steps into the waking world laughing. The leash is off. The thing that could only ever act through deals and dreams is now standing in the town with a body of its own. And it happened because a lonely girl was offered a way to stop time and could not say no. I think this is the single bravest storytelling decision the show ever made, and it is one that some viewers have never quite forgiven. The apocalypse is Mabel's fault, not a villain's scheme that she failed to stop, but a choice she actively made, out of fear and grief and love. Gravity Falls could have let her be tricked in some blameless way. Instead, it makes her complicit, makes the end of the world grow directly out of a completely understandable, completely human desire to not let go of something beautiful before you are ready. And that is the thesis of the entire finale, sitting right here in the setup. Weirdmageddon is what happens when you try to make summer last forever. It is the fear of change given a body and a crown. The monster is not really Bill. The monster is the refusal to grow up. And Bill is just the shape that refusal takes when it finally gets what it wants. So the sky is open, and now we are in the deep water. The 3-part finale that Gravity Falls called Weirdmageddon, and I want to walk through how it actually works, because it is a remarkably strange and specific piece of world ending, full of details that reward a close look. This is the bottom of the story, the place all the earlier layers have been pointing toward, and it is both more grotesque and more contained than people tend to remember. When Bill gains his body, he does not simply spread across the earth, he builds. Over the ruins of the town, he raises an enormous floating pyramid called the Pyramid, a fortress in the sky from which he presides over his new kingdom. He summons his crew, a gang of nightmare creatures from his home dimension, sometimes called the Henchmaniacs, a rogues gallery of impossible shapes. And among the horrors is a monster voiced by a well-known comedian, a sweaty, one-armed abomination that is exactly as unpleasant as that description suggests. And Bill begins remaking Gravity Falls into a playground where the laws of physics are his to bend, a landscape of floating debris and eternal chaos. The most disturbing thing he does is to the townsfolk. Bill petrifies the people of Gravity Falls, turning them to stone, and then he stacks their frozen, screaming bodies into a throne. The series gives it a name and spirit, if not always on screen, a throne built out of frozen human agony, and Bill sits on it. Take a second to picture that in a Disney cartoon. The villain's chair is made of the petrified, terrified townspeople you have spent 2 seasons getting to know. Their faces locked in horror, arranged into furniture for a triangle to lounge on. It is as nightmarish an image as a children's network has ever aired, and the series puts it right there in the center of the frame and holds on it. But here is the crucial limitation, the rule that makes the whole finale possible, and it is the thing most people forget. Weirdmageddon does not spread. Bill is trapped inside Gravity Falls. There is an invisible barrier around the town, a dome he cannot cross, and everything outside it, the rest of Oregon, the rest of the world, is completely untouched and unaware. This is not a global apocalypse. It is a local one, sealed inside the borders of a single town. And Bill is desperate to break out because a kingdom he cannot leave is a prison with a nice view. That containment is why the outside world never comes to help, and it is also why the responsibility to stop him falls entirely on the handful of people trapped inside with him. The cavalry is not coming, it cannot even see what is happening. And it is inside this dome that the Time Baby, the supposedly all-powerful ruler of time, brings his forces to attack Bill, and is erased in an instant, the moment I mentioned earlier that resets your sense of how outmatched everyone is. With the one cosmic power that might have helped gone in a single frame, the only resistance left is a family. Meanwhile, Mabel is not even in the fight because Bill has done something specifically cruel to her. He has sealed her inside a bubble of her own, a prison disguised as paradise. It is a fantasy world, sometimes called Mabeland, marked with her shooting star symbol. a place engineered to give her everything she has ever wanted. An endless summer with no consequences and no goodbyes, precisely the thing she was so afraid to lose. The horror of it is that it is not a dungeon. It is a dream tailored to her exact desires, designed so perfectly that she will never want to leave. And a Mabel who never leaves is a Mabel who is out of Bill's way forever. Dipper, Wendy, and Seuss have to break into the bubble to rescue her. And the real danger inside is not monsters, it is temptation. The pull of a place where nothing ever has to change. Mabel has to choose to walk out of her own perfect fantasy, to accept that summer ends and people grow up, and things you love get left behind in order to rejoin a broken, frightening reality where the people she cares about need her. Her arc across the whole finale is the act of choosing the hard, real thing over the easy, false one, which is the exact opposite of the choice that started the apocalypse. She caused Weirdmageddon by refusing to let go. She helps end it by finally letting go. Which brings us to how Bill is actually beaten, and this is the part I most want to get right, because it is the most misremembered thing in the entire series, and getting it wrong throws away the best trick the show ever pulled. The family does not defeat Bill with the Zodiac. We already went through how that prophecy collapses, the circle of 10 breaking, because Stan and Ford cannot stop fighting long enough to hold hands. So with the destined solution in ruins and the world on fire, the brothers are forced to come up with something else, something that has nothing to do with prophecy and everything to do with the wound between them. To even get into position, the family needs a distraction, and they build one that is pure Gravity Falls. They convert the Mystery Shack itself into a giant walking robot, the Shacktron, and pilot the whole tourist trap into battle against Bill's nightmare creatures. The tacky wooden building the con was run out of transformed into the family's war machine. It is absurd and it is perfect, the cheap, fake attraction becoming the thing that shields the people who lived in it. While the Shacktron draws Bill's forces, the family gets inside the pyramid, and there Bill catches most of them. He is about to win. And this is where the plan turns. Bill wants information locked in Stan's head, the equations that would let him break the barrier and spread his apocalypse across the whole world, and he offers a deal to get it. Ford steps forward and appears to surrender, offering to let Bill into his mind. But Ford has the metal plate, remember, the surgical armor that makes his mind the one place Bill cannot read. So this can only be a bluff, and here is the sleight of hand. The two brothers, who look alike, who have spent the whole series being mistaken for each other, switch clothes without a word. Bill, thinking he is entering Ford's mind to seize the equations, enters Stan's mind instead. He walks straight into the head of the wrong twin, into the mind of the brother he dismissed as the stupid one, the con man, the failure. And once Bill is inside Stan's mind, Ford fires the memory gun, the same device McGucket built to erase his own pain. The weapon we watched being invented a dozen episodes earlier is turned on Stan's mind while Bill is trapped inside it. And it erases everything. It wipes Bill Cipher out of existence, unraveling him inside the mind he thought he had conquered. But it does not only erase Bill, it erases Stan. Every memory the man has, his whole life, his brother, the kids, the 30 years of secret work, all of it goes at once, because to kill the demon, you have to burn down the mind it is standing in, and Stan is the one standing in it. As Bill dissolves, screaming, Stan, blank and confused, but still somehow himself, gets to his feet and punches what is left of the triangle to pieces. The most dangerous entity the series ever conceived is destroyed by an old man with no memories throwing a last punch inside his own erased head. Look at the shape of that ending for a moment, because it is extraordinary. Everything Gravity Falls set up pays off here at once, but none of it pays off the way prophecy promised. The Zodiac, the chosen circle, fails. What works instead is the thing the whole series was actually about, which is Stan, the brother who was thrown out of the house as a boy, who was blamed for the accident, who lied and conned and stole an identity and spent 30 years alone trying to fix his mistake, is the one who saves the world. And he does it by letting his own mind be destroyed. The unappreciated twin, the one everybody underestimated, including Bill, turns out to be the key, precisely because Bill underestimated him too. Bill could not imagine that Ford would sacrifice himself, but Bill never even considered that the plan might run through Stan, because Bill made the same mistake everyone in Stan's life always made. He assumed the loud, dumb, dishonest brother did not matter. And the cost is real, which is the last thing I want to be honest about. because the show does not undo it cheaply. Stan wakes up remembering nothing and no one. He does not know Mabel, he does not know Dipper, he does not know his own brother. The sacrifice is not a fake out that gets reversed in the next scene. His family has to sit with a man who saved them all and cannot remember that they exist, and they have to bring him back slowly, patiently, with photographs and stories, and the scrapbook Mabel kept all summer, coaxing his memory home piece by piece. It works eventually in one of its most tender sequences, but it is work and it is not guaranteed, and for a while the man who won is simply gone. That is the price Gravity Falls puts on saving the world. Not a death, something in some ways harder to watch, a self erased and then lovingly rebuilt by the people it forgot. Let us go back to the objects that started all of this, because the journals themselves are a piece of the iceberg worth sitting inside for a while. And Season 2 is where you finally understand what they are and why they were split apart. There are 3 of them, numbered 1, 2, and 3, each bound in a matching cover stamped with a golden 6-fingered hand and its number, and Ford wrote all 3. They are his life's work, the record of everything strange he cataloged in Gravity Falls. And they are also a set of instructions, because taken together, the 3 journals contain the knowledge of how the portal works. That is why Ford split them up. When he understood what he had helped Bill build, he did not just hide one book. He scattered the 3 journals so that no single person could ever hold all the knowledge at once, so that the blueprint for tearing open reality could not be reassembled. It is a deliberate act of a frightened, responsible man breaking his own masterpiece into pieces and flinging them apart. And the entire plot of the series is, in a sense, the slow and dangerous work of those pieces drifting back together. Dipper finds one in the woods, another passes through other hands over the course of the series, including the child villain Gideon, who wants them for his own ends. And Ford, the man who wrote them, has been chasing the completed set the whole time, because reuniting the journals is both the key to understanding the town and the key to the weapon that could end it. There is something poignant in the design of these books that I do not think gets said enough. They glow. Under the right light, secret pages appear in them, written in invisible ink, revelations that only surface when you know how to look. That is Gravity Falls telling you, in the form of a physical prop, exactly what kind of story it is. Everything in Gravity Falls has a hidden layer that appears only under the right conditions, only for the person willing to hold it up to the light. The journals are the whole show in miniature, a plain-looking object stuffed with secrets that reward attention and punish carelessness. A book that literally shows you more the harder you look at it. And speaking of things hidden in plain sight, once you start looking closely at the show, you begin to notice a number that keeps recurring, tucked into corners of the frame across the whole series. The digits 6, 1, and 8 turn up again and again in places you would never think to look, on signs, on objects, worked into backgrounds. Fans noticed the pattern and traced it, and the widely accepted reading connects that number to the series' creator as a kind of hidden signature, a recurring personal mark left in the fabric of the town. I want to flag that as the fan-decoded interpretation it is, rather than something the series ever stops to explain, but the pattern itself is real, and it is part of a much larger habit this production had of signing its own work in code. The people who made Gravity Falls did not just hide ciphers for the plot. They hid themselves in it, their birthdays and their in-jokes and their fingerprints, scattered through the frames like the journals scattered through the town. That habit is a big part of why this show has the afterlife it does. Most cartoons, once you have watched them, are watched. There is nothing left to do but remember them. Gravity Falls built itself so that watching is only the first pass, so that the real relationship with it begins on the rewatch, with a pause button and a decoder, and a willingness to hold each frame up to the light. The journals are the emblem of that. They are books within a show that reward you for treating the series itself like a book, something to be read slowly, reread, annotated, decoded. And that is the deepest reason the second season in particular has stayed alive in people's minds, because it did not simply tell you a story and end. It handed you a set of glowing, half-hidden books and trusted you to keep reading them long after the screen went dark. Now we go somewhere Gravity Falls itself only ever hinted at, down past the edge of what Season 2 actually put on screen, into the question of what Bill Cipher even is and where he came from, and I have to be careful here, because this is the part of the iceberg where fact and later invention blur. and I want to keep them separated for you. Within the second season itself, Bill's origin is left almost entirely mysterious. He is a triangular dream demon from another dimension, older than you can comprehend, and the series is content to leave him as a cosmic unknown, a thing that arrives fully formed to torment the Pines with no backstory attached. That mystery is deliberate. Bill is scarier when you do not know what made him. But years after the series ended, the creator returned to Bill in a supplementary book, and that book fills in an origin that I want to hand to you clearly labeled, because it is not something the show ever showed you. According to that later material, Bill comes from a second-dimensional world, a flat plane called Euclidia, populated by living geometric shapes. He was born different, with a single eye that could perceive a direction the other shapes could not, the third dimension, up, a concept that was forbidden and unthinkable in his flat world. And the later story says that Bill, unable to live in a world that could not see what he could see, destroyed his own home dimension, wiped out Euclidia and everyone in it, and the material leaves it deliberately unclear how much of that destruction he intended, and how much he tells himself was an accident. I find that a haunting piece of backstory, and also one I would never present as something Season 2 established, because it does something specific and a little sad to the character. It reframes the all-powerful demon as, at his root, a creature who could not fit where he came from and burned it down rather than be trapped in it. There is an echo there of every other character in the series, of Ford who could not fit in his hometown, of Stan cast out of his family, of Mabel terrified of a future that will not let her stay where she is happy. Even the villain, in the end, turns out to be another version of Gravity Falls' one great theme, the terror of change and the destruction that comes from refusing to accept it. But I want to keep the fence up clearly. Inside the 40 episodes, Bill has no explained origin. Everything about Euclidia and the flat world and the destroyed home is later, word from outside the series, and you should hold it at that distance. There is one more piece of deep Bill lore that does appear, in a sense, inside the finale, though almost nobody caught it on first watch because it is hidden the way this show loves to hide things. When Bill is being erased in his final moments as the memory gun tears him apart, he screams out a message. And that message, when it is played in reversed, is an incantation. It is a plea, an invocation of an ancient power, a desperate spell cast by a dying god calling on something even older and greater than himself to bring him back. The name he calls out is the axolotl. The axolotl is one of the strangest and most tantalizing threads in all of Gravity Falls, and it is worth being precise about because it lives right at the boundary of what Gravity Falls confirmed. An axolotl in the real world is a small amphibian, a kind of salamander famous for being able to regrow lost parts of itself, which is already a loaded image for a creature invoked by a being about to be destroyed. Within the series' cosmology, the axolotl is referenced as an entity of enormous, possibly supreme power, something that sits above even Bill and above the Time Baby in the hierarchy of things, a god of gods glimpsed only in fragments. Bill, in his last instant, does not call on a weapon or an ally. He calls on the axolotl, invoking an ancient power in the hope of return, which tells you that even Bill believed there was something out there vast enough to undo his death. What that means, whether the invocation worked, whether Bill is truly and permanently gone or merely sent somewhere, is exactly the kind of question the show refuses to close, and later material has leaned into that ambiguity rather than resolving it. Within the series proper, Bill is destroyed, his body left as a stone statue in the forest. But that final reverse scream, that invocation of the axolotl, is the series planting one last seed of doubt in the very moment of victory. A whisper that maybe nothing this old and this strange is ever entirely over. It is the perfect final secret for a show that taught its audience to distrust the surface of everything, to leave, buried in the villain's dying breath, a code that hints he might have found a way out. One of the strange gifts of knowing the second season is the way it reaches backward and rewrites the first, and this is a layer of the iceberg you can only see on a rewatch. So I want to spend some time on what the finale does to everything that came before it. When you go back to the beginning of Gravity Falls after you know the ending, you are not watching the same show anymore. The Mystery Shack, that cheap wooden tourist trap full of fake exhibits and taxidermy hoaxes, stops being a joke and becomes something closer to a monument. Every dollar Stan squeezed out of a gullible tourist, every tacky attraction, was feeding the machine in the basement. The whole business, the whole persona of the greedy old showman was a 30-year performance funding a rescue mission he could never explain to anyone. On the first watch, the shack is where the comedy lives. On the rewatch, it is where the grief lives. The same thing happens to Stan himself, and it is the reason people who love this show tend to love it more the second time. On a first watch, Stan is the comic relief, the cheapskate, the con man who cares about money more than his great niece and nephew, or so it seems. Then you learn the truth, and you go back, and every gruff, dismissive thing he ever said is suddenly weighted with the secret you now know he was carrying. The man who seemed to keep everyone at arm's length was holding the heaviest possible secret alone, a brother lost to a machine, a guilt with no bottom, a hope he could not risk saying out loud in case it never came true. The series hid an entire tragic character underneath a cartoon grump, and it hid him so well that you have to be told before you can see him, and then you cannot unsee him. Even small things transform. Background details that seemed like throwaway gags turn out to have been foreshadowing all along. Bill Cipher appears in tiny background cameos long before he matters, painted on a wall, glimpsed in a pattern, so that when you rewatch, you realize he was watching the Pines family from the edges of the frame for the entire first season, waiting. Lines of dialogue that sounded like nothing turn out to be clues. Gravity Falls was playing a longer game than you knew, seeding its ending into its beginning, so that the whole thing works less like a story that develops and more like a puzzle that was always complete and only revealed itself in order. That is a rare and difficult thing to build, and it is the main reason people rewatch this show obsessively, rather than simply remembering it fondly. And this is the part of it that moves me most. The rewatch is itself an experience of the series' central theme. Gravity Falls is about the impossibility of going back, about summer ending and childhood running out, and things you love slipping into the past where you cannot reach them. And then it builds itself so that the deepest way to enjoy it is to go back, to return to the beginning knowing what you know, to re-experience the innocence of the early episodes with the weight of the ending pressing on them. The show makes you into Mabel. It makes you want to live inside a summer that has already ended, to replay it, to hold on to it. And every rewatch is a small version of the bubble Bill offered her, a way to visit a perfect past that you know, this time, has to end again. I do not think the series did that by accident. A production this careful about hidden meaning did not stumble into making its own structure an argument about memory and loss. It built a story that you can only fully love by returning to it, about characters who are destroyed by their inability to move on, and it trusted you to feel the ache of that contradiction without ever spelling it out. The second season is the half of Gravity Falls where all of this snaps into focus, where the summer adventure reveals itself to have been an elegy the whole time, a long goodbye disguised as a mystery. And once you have seen it that way, you cannot watch the Mystery Shack open its doors in the first episode without knowing exactly what it is going to cost the man standing behind the counter. Let us come up out of the story itself for a while and look at the real-world layer, the production. Because the single most common thing people believe about Gravity Falls ending is wrong, and it is worth setting straight plainly. The series was not canceled. Disney did not axe it. It did not fail. It was not low-rated. It was not pulled. Gravity Falls ended because its creator, Alex Hirsch, chose to end it. And he chose to end it here, at 40 episodes, because that was always the plan. Hirsch has been consistent about this in interviews. He conceived Gravity Falls as a finite story, the tale of one particular summer with a beginning, a middle, and an end. And he did not want to stretch it into the kind of open-ended cartoon that runs until the audience drifts away. He wanted it to be the story of a summer, and summer's end. So the decision to conclude the show with the second season was not a defeat forced on him from above, it was the fulfillment of the design. He and his staff knew, going into writing the second season, that it would be the last, which is a large part of why that season feels so purposeful, so willing to burn through plot and answer its own mysteries. They were not hoarding secrets for a hypothetical third year. There was no third year coming on purpose, and they wrote toward the ending like people who knew exactly where the finish line was. There is another more human thread in why the series ended when it did, and Hirsch has spoken about it. This was an extraordinarily demanding show to make. The continuity, the callbacks, the buried ciphers, the sheer density of hidden detail we have spent tonight pulling apart, none of that assembles itself. It was the product of obsessive, exhausting work, of a creator and a crew pouring themselves into every frame, hiding codes and planting foreshadowing and keeping an enormous web of connections straight across 40 episodes. Making a show that rewards being paused and decoded means someone has to build every one of those secrets on purpose, and that is not sustainable forever. There is a version of Gravity Falls that ran for 6 seasons and slowly lost the very density that made it special. Hirsch chose the version that stays perfect instead, and I think that was the right call, even though it means we only ever get 40 of these. I find something admirable and a little rare in that decision because the pressure on a hit show is always to continue. A beloved, successful series is a machine that makes money, and the people who own it usually want it to keep running. To stand inside that pressure and say, no, this story is complete, it ends here, requires a kind of discipline that is uncommon in the industry. Hirsch essentially argued that the series was worth more finished than extended, that a perfect 2-season story was a better thing to leave behind than a diluted 5-season one. And he had the standing and the will to make that argument stick. The result is a series with no bad late seasons, no decline, no period where fans say it should have ended earlier, because it ended exactly when it should have. And the timing of the announcement threaded through the season's release in a way that gave the finale extra weight. Fans learned during the second season's run that this was the end, that Weirdmageddon would be the last story. So the audience watched those final episodes knowing they were final. That knowledge changed the experience. The long gaps we talked about at the very start, the months of silence between episodes, took on the quality of a countdown that everyone could see. People were not just waiting for the next episode, they were watching a thing they loved come to a close in real time, savoring and dreading it at once, which is about as close as a television audience gets to the exact feeling the show is about, the feeling of a good thing you cannot stop from ending. The production circumstances, entirely by accident and partly by design, put the viewers inside Gravity Falls' own theme. They spent that year and a half doing what Dipper and Mabel were doing on screen, trying to hold on to a summer that had already started to end. While we are up here in the real world, there is a piece of casting trivia that sits deeper on the iceberg than it has any right to, because it changes how you hear the entire show once you know it. Alex Hirsch, the creator, does not just run Gravity Falls, he performs a startling amount of it. Hirsch is the voice of Grunkle Stan. He is also the voice of Seuss, the sweet, loyal handyman. And he is also the voice of Bill Cipher, the demon at the center of the apocalypse. One man voices the gruff heart of Gravity Falls, its gentlest soul and its greatest evil. Go back and listen to the finale with that in your ears. The scene where Bill, in his showbiz snarl, taunts and manipulates the Pines family. And the scene where Stan, blank and heroic, throws his last punch are the same person talking to himself. The creator is playing both sides of his own climax, the monster and the man who destroys it, the temptation and the sacrifice, all in his own voice. There's something almost fitting about that, because Gravity Falls is so much a product of one obsessive vision, one person's summers and one person's imagination. And to have that person literally voice the hero, the innocent, and the villain is a kind of signature. Hirsch based the twins partly on himself and his own twin sister, which is a documented piece of the series' origin. So the whole thing already comes from a deeply personal place. Learning that he also speaks with the mouths of Stan and Seuss and Bill just extends that, the sense that this is one artist's inner world turned inside out and animated. The rest of the voice cast is worth knowing too because it is deceptively stacked. Dipper is voiced by Jason Ritter, who gives the boy that earnest, cracking voice sincerity that makes his eagerness to grow up so easy to root for and so easy to worry about. Mabel is voiced by Kristen Schaal, whose completely singular voice and comic timing are so bound to the character that it is impossible to imagine Mabel sounding like anyone else. And when Ford finally steps out of that portal, the voice that comes out of the author is J.K. Simmons, an actor of real gravity and authority, which is exactly right, because Ford needed to sound like someone who had spent 30 years surviving across hostile dimensions, someone weathered and brilliant and a little dangerous. Casting a voice that heavy against Hirsch's comic Stan is part of how the series sells the two brothers as fundamentally different men who happen to share a face. There is a wider layer of guest casting we touched on earlier, the parade of recognizable voices tucked into single episodes, and I think it speaks to the regard the show was held in, even while it was airing. People wanted to be in it, comedians and actors and even a famous astrophysicist showed up to voice a villain of the week or a talking pig or a time traveler. Not because it was a huge network tentpole, but because the series had a reputation among people who make things as something special, something worth lending your voice to. That's a particular kind of success, the respect of your peers while you're still on the air, and Gravity Falls had it. What I keep coming back to, though, is that one man voicing the demon and the heart of Gravity Falls at the same time. It is the perfect emblem of what this series is, a story where the darkness and the tenderness come from the same source, where the thing that wants to destroy the family and the family itself are, at the deepest level, dreamed up and spoken by the same imagination. Bill and Stan never sound alike, one all jagged menace and the other all gruff warmth, and yet they are the same throat, the same person reaching in two completely opposite directions at once. There is no better summary of Gravity Falls than that. It is a show that holds terror and love in one hand, and it was, quite literally, all coming out of one voice. There is a layer of this iceberg that is not about any single fact, but about a question people keep asking, which is how a show this dark was allowed to exist on a children's network at all. Because when you lay the second season out and look at what it actually contains, it is startling that this aired in an afternoon cartoon block for kids. Think about what we have already gone through tonight. A demon steals a child's body and injures it for fun. An artificial girlfriend murders the people who created her. A brilliant man erases his own mind piece by piece until he is a babbling wreck in the town square. And the series plays his self-destruction back to you in reverse, so you can watch it happen. And in the finale, the villain turns the townspeople to stone and stacks their screaming, petrified bodies into a chair. None of that is softened. The show does not wink at you to say it is only pretending. It does not pull back to reassure you that everything is fine. It commits. And I think the reason it works, the reason it never tips into being gratuitous or traumatizing, is that the darkness is always in service of the emotion. The series is not dark to shock you. It is dark because the things it is about, growing up, losing people, guilt, the fear of change, are frightening things down to the root, and it refuses to lie to children about that. It treats its young audience as people who can handle real feeling, who have already felt the fear of a parent leaving or a summer ending or a friendship changing, and who are better served by a story that takes those fears seriously than by one that pretends they do not exist. That is a delicate line to walk, and Gravity Falls walks it by, always anchoring the horror to a heart. The demon-possessing Dipper is terrifying, but the point of the scene is Dipper's love for his sister. McGucket erasing himself is devastating, but the point is the mercy and the cost of forgetting. And the series later lets him heal. The throne of frozen townsfolk is nightmarish, but it exists to make you feel exactly how much has been lost, so that the rescue means something. Every dark thing is load-bearing. Take it out and the emotion collapses. Gravity Falls earned the right to frighten children by only ever frightening them about things that matter, and by always, eventually, being on the side of the people it put in danger. I have a lot of respect for how far it pushed, because it would have been so easy to make a safer, blander version of this show, one that kept the mystery and the jokes and threw out the ache. That version would have been fine. It would also have been forgotten. What makes people carry Gravity Falls into adulthood? What makes grown adults revisit a Disney cartoon and find it holds up is precisely that it did not flinch. It looked at the real terrors of being a kid on the edge of growing up, and it put them on screen honestly, dressed as monsters so they could be survived, but never disguised so thoroughly that they stopped being true. That is a rare kind of courage for a children's show, and it is the thing, more than the ciphers or the twists, that I think earns it the devotion it has. And it is worth saying that Gravity Falls got away with this partly because it was smart about where it hid its weight. The darkest ideas are often the ones buried deepest, in the reversed messages, in the background details, in the implications rather than the images. A young child watching casually sees a fun adventure with some spooky bits. An older kid or an adult or anyone willing to pause and look finds the real horror waiting underneath. The series layered its darkness the same way it layered its ciphers so that everyone got the version of it they were ready for. That is not an accident of a show that stumbled into being dark. That is a show that knew exactly how frightening it was being and calibrated it with enormous care so that it could tell the truth to the kids who needed to hear it without ever breaking the ones who did not. Now we reach the very bottom, the layer where the show stopped being a thing on a screen and reached out into the physical world. And this is my favorite part of the whole iceberg, because it is where the line between the fiction and reality dissolved completely. Remember that stone statue we opened on, the triangle with one hand outstretched in the woods, the last image of the finale? That statue is real, it exists, and the story of how people found it is one of the strangest things a fandom and a creator ever did together. A few months after the series ended, in the summer of 2016, Alex Hirsch launched something called the Cipher Hunt. It was a real-world scavenger hunt, an international treasure hunt built out of the same kind of codes and clues the series had spent 40 episodes teaching its audience to solve. Hirsch began it by posting a cryptic photograph, and from there fans had to decode clue after clue, and the clues led not to more images on a website but to actual physical locations scattered across the planet. The hunt sent people to Japan, to a shrine where a clue was hidden. It sent people to Russia, to a cathedral in St. Petersburg. It sent people crawling over sites in the United States. This was not a game you could win from your bedroom. It required fans in different countries to physically go to real places, find hidden clues left in the real world, and share what they found so the collective could move to the next step. And at the end of the trail, buried in the woods of Oregon, was the prize. Hirsch had commissioned an actual physical statue of Bill Cipher, a life-size version of the frozen stone triangle from the finale, and he had it planted out in the forest, seeded with moss so that it would look like it had been sitting there for years, exactly as it appears in the series' final shot. The fans followed the codes across the world and then converged on the Oregon woods and found it, the real Bill standing right where the fictional one had fallen. They located it in early August of 2016, a collaborative act of decoding by people who had never met, spread across continents, all working the same puzzle at once. Think about what that actually represents. The series' entire ethos, the idea that everything is a code and the frame rewards you for looking closer, that the summer never fully ends if you keep decoding it, was made physically true. Hirsch took Gravity Falls' central promise and turned it into a real object hidden in the real world, findable only by the exact skills the series had trained into its audience. The Cipher Hunt is the series keeping its word. It spent 40 episodes telling you that paying attention would be rewarded, that the secrets were real and the codes led somewhere, and then it proved it by hiding an actual treasure at the end of an actual trail and letting the fandom find it. There has never been a cleaner fusion of a story and the community that loved it. The statue did not stay in the woods. Leaving a large plexiglass triangle in an Oregon forest was never going to be permanent, and it eventually found a home at a roadside attraction in California, a quirky tourist spot called Confusion Hill, which is where it stands today. There is something perfect about that the Bill Cipher statue ended up as a permanent exhibit at a real-world mystery-themed roadside attraction. Because that is exactly the kind of place the Mystery Shack was, a cheap, wonderful tourist trap on a lonely road. The statue went home in a sense. The fictional oddity that started in a fictional tourist trap ended up as a genuine oddity in a genuine one, a piece of a cartoon you can now drive to and stand next to and photograph. The fiction leaked out into the world and became a landmark. I find the whole Cipher Hunt deeply moving as a coda to the series, because of what it says about the relationship between this show and its audience. Most stories end and leave you on the outside, watching the door close. Gravity Falls ended and then opened a door into the real world and invited you to keep playing. It treated the fans not as consumers who had finished consuming, but as fellow solvers, partners in a game that did not have to stop just because the episodes had. The statue in the woods and then on the roadside, is a monument to that, a physical proof that for this one show, the boundary between the story and the people who loved it was always meant to be crossed. You were never just watching Gravity Falls. If you wanted to, you could walk right into it, and thousands of people did. Right alongside the statue in the woods, at the bottom of everything, there is a book, and it is a real book you can buy and hold, which is one more way this show refused to stay on the screen. Not long after the series ended, in the summer of 2016, the publishers released Journal 3, a physical, in-universe copy of the very journal Dipper, carried through the whole series, the one with the six-fingered hand on the cover. It is not a companion guide written about the show. It is presented as the actual artifact, the real journal, reproduced so that a fan could own the object the characters spent 40 episodes chasing. And it was not a token cash-in either. Journal 3 went to the top of the bestseller lists, a book based on a concluded children's cartoon outselling most of what was on the shelves that season, which tells you something about how deep the devotion to this show ran. People did not just want to remember Gravity Falls, they wanted to hold a piece of it. The book is packed with the same density as Gravity Falls, the sketches and the notes and the handwriting, plus new material, plus codes, some of which fans set about decoding the moment it landed. Because of course they did, because that is what this show made its audience into. Even the tie-in book was a puzzle box. Even the merchandise had secrets buried in it. There is a particular buried secret in that book that I love, and it takes us to the very deepest and strangest connection at the bottom of this iceberg, the link between Gravity Falls and Rick and Morty. Alex Hirsch and Justin Roiland, the co-creator of Rick and Morty, are friends, and their two shows were being made in overlapping years, and that friendship left traces. We already noted that Roiland voiced the time traveler Blendon in the second season. But it goes further because hidden inside the real Journal 3, there is a nod to Rick and Morty tucked away for people willing to look. A little cross-dimensional wink between two creators who clearly enjoyed hiding things in each other's work. The two shows share a sensibility, a love of the multiverse, and the cosmically strange and the emotionally devastating hidden under the absurd. And the fact that they slip references to each other into the margins is exactly the kind of secret both fandoms adore. Below the finale, then, there is a whole reef of supplementary material, and I want to be clear about its status because it matters for how you hold it. The series itself, the canon, is 40 episodes, and it is complete, and it ends. Everything else, the real Journal 3, the collections of shorts, the comics and legends released later, and much more recently, a book written from the perspective of Bill Cipher himself, all of that is extra. It is officially sanctioned. Much of it comes straight from Hirsch, and it fills in corners the series left dark, like the origin of Bill we talked about earlier. But it is not a third season. There is no third season. The story on screen is closed, and these later objects are gifts left around the edges of it. Additional pages for the people who could not bear to stop reading. Enjoy them as that, as marginalia, as the author continuing to leave notes in the margins for the fans who kept the fires lit, and not as a continuation of the tale itself, which is finished. What strikes me about this whole bottom layer, the statue and the book, and the hidden cross-references, and the ongoing trickle of new secrets years later, is that Gravity Falls is a show that has never quite agreed to be over. Most series end and recede into memory. This one ended and then kept generating new things to decode. New physical objects, new hunts, new hidden nods, for years and years, so that being a fan of it is less like having watched a show and more like maintaining a relationship with something that occasionally sends you another puzzle in the mail. Nearly a decade past the finale, people are still finding things, still decoding, still arguing over what a particular symbol meant. The iceberg does not have a floor, exactly, it just keeps going down into the dark, and every so often someone swims a little deeper and finds one more thing that was waiting there the whole time. For all that this show answered, and it answered a remarkable amount, closing its central mysteries with a confidence most mystery box shows never manage, it also left doors deliberately ajar, and the things it chose not to explain are their own layer worth swimming through. A show this careful does not leave loose ends by accident. When Gravity Falls declines to answer something, the silence is a choice, and the choices are interesting. The axolotl is the biggest of these open doors. We know Bill invoked it in his dying moment, calling on an ancient power in the hope of return. We know it is spoken of as something immense, sitting near the top of whatever hierarchy governs this cosmology. But what it actually is, what it wants, whether it answered Bill's call, none of that is resolved on screen. It is left as a shape in the deep water, referenced just enough to let you know it is there and never enough to let you see it clearly. Fans have spent years theorizing about the axolotl, and the show and the material around it has been content to let the theories run rather than settle them, because a fully explained God is far less frightening than a glimpsed one. Then there is the screaming future version of Dipper that the shapeshifter became, that image from early in the season that the series planted and never returned to. Was it a genuine possible future, a real glimpse of what Dipper might become, or just a monster reaching for the worst thing in a scared boy's imagination? Gravity Falls never says. It lets the ambiguity sit there, unresolved, so that the image keeps its power, because an answered nightmare stops being a nightmare and becomes a fact, and this show understood the difference. Some of its most effective moments are the ones it refused to close, and the codes themselves are a genuine open frontier, not a metaphorical one. There are, by many accounts, ciphers and hidden messages scattered through the series and its tie-in materials that remain unsolved or contested or only partially cracked. This is a show whose secret layer is so vast that the fandom has not definitively finished reading it even now, years on. Every so often, someone claims a new solution to an old code, and the community argues about whether it holds. That is an astonishing thing for a piece of media to be able to say about itself, that its own audience is not finished decoding it, that there may still be messages in it that no one has correctly read. Most shows can be exhausted. This one has a bottom that nobody has definitively touched. I think Gravity Falls left these doors open on purpose because it understood something about mystery that a lot of stories forget, which is that the point of a mystery is not always the solution. Gravity Falls answered the mysteries that were about people, the identity of the author, the truth of Stan, the origin of the conflict between the brothers, because those answers deepen the emotion and reward your investment. But it left open the mysteries that were about the cosmos, the axolotl, the deepest nature of Bill, the unsolved codes, because those are more powerful as questions than as answers. The series knew which mysteries to close and which to leave breathing, and that judgment is a big part of why it feels so complete and so bottomless at the same time. It gave you every answer you actually needed and withheld exactly the ones that were better kept. That balance is rare, and it is the reason the intro to tonight is true, that a show which ran for only 2 summers is still sitting on mysteries it never fully answered. That is not a flaw or an unfinished quality. It is design. Gravity Falls wanted to be the kind of thing you could keep returning to and keep finding more in, and you cannot build that if you tie every thread. So it left some untied, on purpose, in the deep water where the light does not reach, precisely so that there would always be a reason to go back down and look again. Underneath every layer we have gone through tonight, the ciphers and the portal and the demon and the backstory, the real subject of the second season is 2 children on the last edge of childhood. And I want to spend a little time on the twins themselves before we surface, because the whole enormous machine of the plot exists to put pressure on them. Dipper and Mabel are twins born 5 minutes apart, and the season sets them up as 2 opposite answers to the same terrifying question, which is, what do you do when you can feel childhood ending? Dipper's answer is to rush toward the future. He spends the season desperate to be older, to be taken seriously, to shed the awkward, overlooked boy he is, and become a man worth listening to. That is why Ford's offer of an apprenticeship is so seductive to him, because it is an invitation to skip ahead, to become the serious, grown-up mystery hunter he wants to be, to leave boyhood behind and step into significance. Dipper is running at adulthood as fast as he can, and the show, through that screaming future vision and through the weight of the choices he keeps having to make, keeps asking whether he understands what he is running toward, whether the maturity he craves might cost him things he has not thought to protect. Mabel's answer is the exact opposite, and we have talked about where it leads, so I will not walk back through the rift and the bubble again. Where Dipper strains forward, she digs in her heels. She wants to freeze the summer, to keep everything exactly as it is, to never let the two of them be pulled apart by the growing up that is coming for them both. Her terror is not of adulthood itself so much as of separation, of the moment when she and her brother stop being a single unit and become two people with different lives. And because she is the one who has offered the deal that ends the world, her fear is the one that gets a body and a crown. But it is crucial that the series does not treat her fear as worse than his. They are the same fear, pointed in opposite directions. One twin is scared of the future, and the other is scared of losing the past. And both of those are just different faces of the fear of change. What the finale does with these two answers is the quiet masterstroke of the whole season. It does not tell you that either twin was right. Dipper does not get to stay and become Ford's apprentice, and Mabel does not get to freeze the summer forever, and neither of those denials is presented as a punishment. Instead, the thing that saves them over and over is each other. When Dipper has the chance to chase his future by staying, what he ultimately values more is his sister. When Mabel is trapped in a perfect fantasy, what pulls her out is her brother needing her in the real broken world. The answer the season lands on is not rush forward, and it is not cling to the past. It is go through it together. Growing up is going to happen, separation is going to come, the summer is going to end, and the only thing that makes any of that survivable is the person going through it beside you. And that is why the series ends the way it does, with the twins turning 13 and leaving Gravity Falls together on the same bus heading home. The birthday they were so afraid of arrives, and it is not the end of them. It is just the next thing, faced side by side. The season spends 20 episodes and an apocalypse teaching two kids that they cannot stop time, cannot skip ahead, and cannot freeze in place, and that this is not a tragedy as long as they do not have to face it alone. For a show that looks like a Monster of the Week cartoon on the surface, that is a startlingly wise thing to be about, and it is the thing underneath all the codes and all the lore that makes people cry at the end of a Disney show about a haunted tourist trap. The mystery was never really the monsters. The mystery was always these two kids, and whether they would make it through the hardest thing that happens to everyone, which is simply getting older. And the answer Gravity Falls gives is yes, together they will. Before we surface all the way, I want to give some time to the people who are not Pines by blood, but who become the family anyway. Because Gravity Falls is as much about the family you assemble as the family you're born into. And the second season is where that assembled family really solidifies. The Mystery Shack is not just a house with two great uncles and two kids in it. It is a strange little chosen household, and the show cares about every member of it. Sue's is the clearest example. He is the handyman, technically an employee, a man Stan pays to fix things, and over the course of the series, he becomes something much closer to a son his own father left him, which is the wound the twins healed with their time wish. And into that absence, Stan steps without a word about it. Not with speeches, but with the grumbling, undemonstrative care of a man who does not know how to say he loves someone and shows it by keeping them close. By the end, Seuss is not the help. He is family, and the series marks that by having him inherit the shack itself, becoming its new keeper when the older generation moves on. There is something lovely in that, the abandoned boy who waited by the window for a father who never came, ending up as the man the whole place is entrusted to. He got a family by building one, or rather by being built into one, and the series treats that as no less real than blood. Wendy is the other teenager Gravity Falls fills out in the second season, and what I appreciate is that it lets the crush Dipper carried for her in the first season resolve into something better than romance, which is friendship. Wendy becomes one of the people who charges into the apocalypse alongside the family, one of the ones who goes into the bubble to pull Mabel out, a genuine comrade rather than an object of longing. The series grows Dipper up a little precisely by letting him move from wanting Wendy to simply having her as a friend who has his back when the world is ending. That is a more honest arc than the one a lesser show would have given, the one where the boy eventually gets the girl. Gravity Falls gives him something more durable instead, and then there is the town itself, the whole oblivious, memory-wiped, weird population of Gravity Falls, which the show slowly reveals it loves. All those background figures, the strange residents, the local eccentrics, accumulate into a place that is worth saving, which is the entire reason the apocalypse has stakes. When the family fights to take back the falls, they are not fighting for an abstract principle. They are fighting for a specific, ridiculous, beloved little town full of people who will never fully understand what was done to protect them, because their memories of the weirdness keep getting wiped away. There is something almost saintly in that. The idea of saving people who will not remember they were in danger, doing the hard thing for a community that cannot thank you because it is not allowed to know. The Pines protect a town that will go back to forgetting, and they do it anyway. That to me is the warmest idea in the whole show, warmer even than the twins, and it is the thing I would point to if someone asked why a cartoon about ciphers and demons makes people feel so much. Gravity Falls is, at its core, about the bonds you make in a specific place during a specific stretch of time, the summer household, the chosen family, the town you come to love, and about how those bonds are worth any cost even though time is going to scatter them anyway. Everyone in that shack knows, on some level, that the summer is going to end and the family is going to spread out across the map and things will never be exactly this again. And they love each other fiercely anyway, precisely because it is temporary. Gravity Falls never pretends the togetherness will last forever. It argues that it matters more because it will not. There is one relationship we have circled all night that deserves to be looked at head-on before we close, because it is the true climax of the series, more than the defeat of Bill, and that is the reconciliation of Stan and Ford. We started deep in their story, two boys who broke each other and never learned to apologize, 30 years of guilt and impersonation, and a brother lost to a machine. The whole second season is, underneath the apocalypse, the slow and painful work of these two old men figuring out whether they can forgive each other, and the series refuses to make it easy. When Ford first comes back through the portal, it is not a warm reunion. He is angry. Stan sent him into that portal, took his name, faked his death, and reactivated the very machine Ford spent his life trying to keep shut. From Ford's side, his brother is the man who ruined everything and then compounded it. And Stan, for his part, spent 30 years sacrificing his entire life for a brother who comes back and immediately treats him like a screw-up. The two of them spend much of the back half of the season barely able to be in a room together. The old childhood wound reopened by decades of new grievances layered on top. This is why the Zodiac fails, remember, because when the world needs them to join hands, they still cannot stop fighting. Their broken bond is not a background detail. It is the specific thing standing between everyone and survival. And this is what makes the ending land so hard. The apology, when it finally comes, does not come in words. It comes in the moment Ford is willing to let his mind be sacrificed to stop Bill, and then in the moment the plan turns, and it is Stan who makes the sacrifice instead, giving up his entire self, his memories, his identity, everything he is, to save his brother and the kids and the world. That act is the apology. 30 years of things neither of them could say out loud, resolved not by a conversation but by Stan proving, as completely as a person can, that he would give up his own mind for the brother he once sent through a portal. And Ford, watching his brother wake up, remembering nothing, understanding at last exactly what Stan is and always was, gets to spend the epilogue doing the thing he never did as a boy, which is putting his brother back together, patiently, lovingly, one memory at a time. That reversal is the whole show in a single move. As kids, Ford was the gifted one, and Stan was the screw-up who ruined his future, and their father and the world agreed with that verdict. And Ford carried it into adulthood, still half believing that his brother was the lesser man. The finale detonates that. It reveals that Stan, the failure, the con man, the one nobody believed in, is capable of a loyalty and a sacrifice that outstrips anything the genius ever did. And Ford has to face the fact that he spent his whole life underestimating the person who loved him most. When the two of them finally do reconcile, when Ford helps Stan's memory come home and they set off together to sail the world hunting oddities on their boat, it is not just two brothers making up. It is a lifelong verdict being overturned. The unloved twin finally seen clearly by the one person whose opinion he needed. I think that is why grown adults get so emotional about a Disney cartoon. Almost everyone has a version of this somewhere. A sibling, a family rift, an old wound that words never fixed, someone they love and cannot talk to, a verdict handed down in childhood that never got revised. Gravity Falls takes that universal ache and gives it the ending. People rarely get in real life, the ending where the two people who hurt each other most find their way back, not by talking it out, but by one of them proving beyond any doubt that the love was always there under the anger. It is a fantasy, in a way, as much a fantasy as the demons and the portals. But it is the fantasy the whole show was secretly about. The hope that even the deepest break between two people who love each other is not necessarily permanent, that summer can end and childhood can run out, and a lifetime can be wasted on a grudge, and it can still, somehow, be made right before the end. Let us talk for a moment about how the finale looks, because Weirdmageddon is not just a bold piece of writing, it is a bold piece of animation, and the visual daring of those last episodes is part of why they lodge so deeply in people. For most of its run, Gravity Falls looks like a warm, rounded, friendly cartoon, all soft forest greens and cozy interiors, and a color palette that feels like late summer light. And then the rift breaks, and the show throws all of that out. When Bill takes over, the sky itself changes. A great swirling wound opens in the heavens, all reds and purples and impossible geometry, and the familiar town buckles under laws of physics that no longer hold. Gravity fails in patches, buildings float. The animators let the world come apart in ways that a normal episode would never allow, and the effect is deeply disorienting because you have spent 30-some episodes learning the visual grammar of this place, the way it is supposed to look and feel, and the finale systematically violates all of it. The comfort of the series' own art style is taken away from you at the exact moment the characters lose the comfort of their world. Form and content collapse together. Bill himself is a triumph of that daring. A flat yellow triangle should not be able to carry the menace of a great animated villain, and yet he does, precisely because the series is willing to distort him. When Bill is at his most powerful and most unhinged, the animation lets him warp, lets his single eye split and multiply, lets his geometry break into something that feels deeply wrong to look at. He becomes a walking violation of the rules Gravity Falls established, which is exactly what he is in the story, a thing from outside reality that reality cannot contain. The design does the storytelling. You believe Bill is beyond the normal order of the world because the animation refuses to keep him inside the normal order of the frame. And in the middle of all that chaos, the series still finds room for images of real beauty and real horror held in careful balance. The throne of petrified townsfolk we have discussed. The eerie, saccharine perfection of Mabel's bubble, a fantasy world rendered in deliberately sweet, slightly nauseating color to signal that something is wrong beneath the prettiness. The giant robot made out of the Mystery Shack lumbering into battle, absurd and heroic at once. The finale is a proving ground for a team of artists who had spent years building a world and now got to break it spectacularly. And you can feel the creative energy of people cutting loose after a long, disciplined run, finally allowed to draw the apocalypse they had been building toward. I think this is worth dwelling on because it is easy, when you talk about a show being smart, to make it sound like the intelligence is all in the writing, the ciphers, the plot construction, the themes. But Gravity Falls is also just beautifully made, and the finale is where that craft becomes impossible to ignore. The boldness of the images, the willingness to make a children's cartoon truly nightmarish and truly gorgeous in the same frame, the confidence to abandon the series' own comfortable look at the climax, all of that is its own kind of storytelling, doing work that no line of dialogue could do. The apocalypse feels like an apocalypse not because a character tells you the stakes are high, but because the whole visual world you trusted has been torn open in front of you, and there is no faster way to make an audience feel that something precious is ending than to break the very style they fell in love with. Now that we are near the surface again, it is worth looking at what this show left behind it. Because Gravity Falls did not just end well, it changed what a certain kind of television was allowed to be. And you can see its fingerprints all over the animation that came after it. When it premiered, the idea of a cartoon aimed at children that carried a tightly serialized, season-spanning mystery, with real continuity and a planned ending and a mythology that rewarded obsessive attention was not the norm. Most cartoons for kids were episodic by design, built so you could drop in on any episode in any order and miss nothing. Gravity Falls insisted on the opposite. It demanded that you watch in order, that you remember, that you carry information from one episode to the next, and it trusted that children could and would do that. That trust turned out to be well placed, and it helped open a door. In the years around and after Gravity Falls, a wave of animated shows leaned harder into serialization, into emotional continuity, into stories that treated their young audiences as capable of following long arcs and sitting with real feeling. It would be too much to credit all of that to one show because these things move in currents and many creators were pushing the same direction at once. But Gravity Falls was one of the loud, undeniable proofs of concept, a show that demonstrated a serialized, mythology-driven, emotionally serious cartoon could be both a critical success and a genuine phenomenon, beloved by kids and adults at the same time without talking down to either. Its other great inheritance is the mystery box approach done right, and I stress done right because the mystery box is a dangerous tool. Plenty of stories set up elaborate mysteries and enigmatic hints and then either fail to answer them or answer them in ways that betray the questions. Gravity Falls is one of the cleaner examples of a mystery-driven story that actually paid off, that knew its own answers from early on and planted them fairly and delivered them in a way that made the setup better in retrospect rather than worse. That is rare enough that it became a kind of standard people point to, an example of how to make the promises of a mystery box and then actually keep them. When people praise a newer show for sticking its landing, for having clearly known where it was going, Gravity Falls is often somewhere in the background of that praise as the thing that proved it was possible. And then there is the cultural texture of it, the way it seeped into a generation. The symbols became tattoos. The Bill cipher wheel, the pine tree, the shooting star, turned into iconography that fans wear and draw and reference to each other as a kind of secret handshake. The catchphrases and the images and the codes entered the shared vocabulary of a certain age cohort, the kids who were the right age when it aired and who are adults now carrying it with them. A show that lasted only 2 summers on the air has had a cultural afterlife out of all proportion to its length, precisely because of how much it packed into that short run and how deeply it embedded itself in the people who found it. What I find most telling about its legacy is the specific quality of the devotion. People do not just remember Gravity Falls fondly the way they remember a childhood cartoon. They study it. They return to it as adults and find new things. They pass it to younger siblings and to their own kids and watch it hold up. It occupies the odd category of a children's show that grows with you, that gives you the adventure when you are young and the ache and the craft and the codes when you are older, so that it never quite exhausts itself. That is the rarest thing a piece of popular art can achieve. To be truly for children and truly for the adults those children become at the same time in the same frames, and Gravity Falls managed it across a mere 40 episodes. There is a phenomenon that grew up around this show while it was airing that I think is worth describing on its own, because it is one of the purest examples of what a fandom can be when a story invites it in, and it belongs at this level of the iceberg. Those long gaps between episodes we talked about at the very start, the months of silence during the second season, did not leave the audience idle. They turned the audience into a collective code-breaking machine. Every time a new episode aired, thousands of people would descend on it, not to watch passively, but to comb through it frame by frame, hunting. They would find the end credit cryptogram and race to solve it. They would search the backgrounds for the hidden keyword needed to crack that episode's visionaire cipher. They would slow down and reverse the audio to catch the whispered messages. And crucially, they did this together, pooling their findings on forums and message boards, so that no single person had to crack everything alone. One fan would spot a symbol, another would recognize the cipher, a third would supply the key, and collectively, the community would decode the episode's hidden layer within hours of it airing. It was a distributed act of reading, an entire population of amateur cryptographers working the same puzzle in parallel. I find that beautiful because of how neatly it matches what the show was doing on screen. Inside the story, Dipper is a boy with a journal, decoding the secrets of a mysterious town, gradually uncovering a hidden truth by paying closer attention than anyone else. Outside the story, the fandom became exactly that. A community of Dippers poring over the text of the series itself as if it were the journal, decoding it, annotating it, uncovering the secrets the creators had buried. The series did not just have fans, it had co-investigators. It handed its audience the same role its protagonist played, and the audience took it up with a seriousness that most entertainment never inspires. And the long waits, which should have been a frustration, became the engine of this. If the episodes had all dropped at once, there would have been no time for the slow communal work of decoding, no shared anticipation, no months of theorizing in the gaps about what a particular clue meant or where the story was going. The very thing that made watching Gravity Falls in real time difficult, the erratic schedule and the long silences, was what gave the fandom room to do its best work. People built elaborate theories during those droughts, argued them, refined them, and some of those theories, as we saw with the Zodiac Wheel, were so compelling that they fed back into Gravity Falls itself. The boundary between the people making the series and the people watching it became truly porous in a way that is very hard to engineer and almost impossible to fake. That culture has not fully died even now. Years after the finale, there are still people working the codes, still communities dedicated to Gravity Falls' secrets, still newcomers arriving and being handed the accumulated decoding work of the fans who came before them. The series created a body of shared knowledge, a folklore of solved and unsolved puzzles that gets passed down, and I think that is the deepest reason Gravity Falls feels less like a finished product and more like a living thing. Stories that you simply consume are over when you finish them. A story that turns its audience into a community of solvers that gives them work to do together. That rewards their collective attention with more and more hidden depth. That story keeps living in the people who love it because loving it is not a passive state. It is an activity, and as long as there are people willing to do the work, the series is never quite finished being read. There is one more idea I want to lay out before we close, because it runs under the whole season like a current, and it is the series' actual moral philosophy, the thing it believes about people. We touched it back in the Unicorn episode, the one that declared there is no such thing as pure good or pure evil, that everybody is a mixed and complicated thing, and anyone selling you a clean measure of a person's soul is running a scam. That is not just the moral of one episode. It is the ethical spine of the entire series, and once you notice it, you see it everywhere. Look at how the show handles almost every character on its supposed villain side. The rich, mean girl turns out to be a frightened kid trapped by her parents, capable of real courage when it counts. The child con artist stays selfish and dangerous and is also sometimes pitiable and even briefly decent. The Babbling Town lunatic is a broken genius who deserves compassion, not mockery. And the greedy old con man at the center of it all, the one who lies and cheats and cares about money, is revealed as capable of more sacrifice than anyone else in the story. Over and over, Gravity Falls takes a character you were invited to judge simply and complicates them, until the simple judgment collapses. It keeps insisting that the mean ones have reasons and the good ones have flaws, and nobody is only the worst thing they have done. Even the heroes are held to this. Ford, the brilliant author, the closest thing Gravity Falls has to a wise mentor, is also proud and cold, and the man whose vanity opened the door to the apocalypse. Dipper, the earnest hero, can be selfish and obsessive and willing to neglect the people who love him in pursuit of a mystery. Mabel, the burst of pure joy, causes the end of the world out of a fear she cannot master. Gravity Falls loves these people and refuses to pretend they are clean. It gives its heroes real faults, and its villains real wounds, and it asks you to hold both at once, to love people who are also, in various ways, a mess. The one apparent exception is Bill, who really does seem to be pure malice, a villain with no redeeming quality. And I think that is deliberate too, because the series needs a true evil at the top to give the moral grayness beneath it meaning. But even Bill, in the material that fills in his origin, gets complicated into something sadder, a creature who could not fit where he came from and destroyed it, which does not excuse him but does explain him. The series would rather understand its monster than simply hate it. And that impulse, the refusal to let anyone be a flat symbol of good or evil, is a strikingly grown-up thing for a show made for children. I think that is a large part of why it lands so deeply and lasts so long. Children's media is often built on clean moral lines, the hero and the villain, the good guys and the bad guys, because it is easier and because it is thought to be what kids need. Gravity Falls set that aside. It told a generation of children that people are complicated, that the ones who seem bad might be hurt and the ones who seem good might hurt you, that your grumpy relative might be a hero and your hero might be a fool, and that loving people means loving them as the mixed and difficult things they actually are. That is a hard lesson and a true one, and slipping it to kids inside a mystery adventure about a haunted town is one of the kindest things the show ever did. It prepared them, a little, for the real people they were going to meet. The last piece I want to fit into place, right near the surface now, is a pattern that governs the whole machinery of the series, which is that in Gravity Falls, everything has a price. Nothing comes free. Every gain is paid for. Every shortcut has a cost that arrives later. And once you notice that rule, you realize the entire series is built on it, from its smallest gags to its largest tragedy. It starts with Bill, whose whole nature is the deal, the bargain, the handshake in blue flame. He never simply takes, he offers, and you accept. And the thing you wanted comes with a price you did not read carefully enough. A password that costs you your body, a frozen summer that costs you the world. Bill is the personification of the series' economic law, the being who exists to make you learn, too late, what your wish actually cost. But the pattern runs far beyond him. The memory gun, Gravity Falls' great mercy, only ever works as a trade, peace bought with a piece of yourself. And the finale makes the biggest version of that bargain when a man pays with his entire mind to buy the world's survival. Even the happy resolutions are purchases. Nothing is free. Look at how consistently the season enforces this. Ford's brilliance cost him his brother, his sanity's worth of years in exile, and the friendship of a man he broke. Stan's 30 years of secret devotion cost him his name, his honesty, and nearly his relationship with the kids when the truth came out. The twins' wish to help Zeus cost them their own prize from Globnar, which they gave away. Pacifica's moment of decency cost her the safety of her family's approval. Over and over, Gravity Falls shows someone reaching for a good thing and then shows you the bill. And the moral weight of the series comes from how seriously it takes that arithmetic. Good outcomes are not handed down. They are bought, usually by someone giving up something they did not have to give. I find this the sternest thing about the series' worldview because it is the opposite of wish fulfillment. A lot of stories, especially for children, run on the fantasy that you can have what you want without paying for it, that the hero wins and keeps everything and the cost falls only on the villain. Gravity Falls does not believe that. It believes that anything worth having costs something, that love and safety and growing up and saving the people you care about all come with a price tag, and that the measure of a person is what they are willing to pay. The heroes of Gravity Falls are not the ones who want everything. They are the ones willing to give up what they can least afford to lose, and the villain is the one who wants it all and intends to pay nothing. That is why the ending feels earned rather than granted. The world is saved, the family is reunited, the summer gets its proper goodbye, but none of it is free, and you have watched every payment being made. By the time the bus pulls out of Gravity Falls, you have seen what this happy ending cost in years and memories and sacrifices and the simple pain of letting go. And that is exactly why it lands as something real rather than something convenient. The show taught you its economy for 40 episodes so that when it finally gave you the ending you wanted, you would understand it was not a gift. It was paid for, in full, by people who loved each other enough to cover the price. And an ending you have watched being paid for is worth infinitely more than one you were simply handed. Right at the surface, before we climb out, let me gather up a few things that even devoted fans misremember, because a show with this much hidden detail generates myths about itself, and it is worth having the record straight in your head as you drift off. These are the small errors that creep into how people retell the second season, and correcting them is its own gentle pleasure. The first and biggest is the mix-up between the two old men, which we set straight early, but which bears repeating because it is so easy to slip on. The one who runs the shack for most of the series is Stanley. The one who wrote the journals and walks out of the portal is Stanford, called Ford. The author is Ford, the 6 fingers are Ford, the 30 years lost are Ford. If you ever find yourself saying that Grunkle Stan wrote the journals, you have swapped the twins, and the whole emotional architecture of the series depends on keeping them apart. The second is the belief that the Zodiac Wheel is how Bill is defeated. It is not. The Circle of 10 is set up as the destined solution, and then it fails, because the two brothers cannot stop arguing long enough to complete it. Bill is beaten by the memory gun, inside a mind, at the cost of a man's entire self. If you remember the finale as everyone joining hands and destiny saving the day, you are remembering the plan Gravity Falls deliberately broke, not the thing that actually happened. The third is treating Bill as a physical presence too early. For almost the whole series, he cannot touch the waking world with his own hands. He works through dreams and deals and possession, and he only gains a real body at the very end when the rift is destroyed. Everything he does before that requires someone to say yes. And the fourth, related, is imagining Weirdmageddon as a global catastrophe. It is not. It is sealed inside the town by an invisible barrier, contained, local, which is the whole reason the outside world never notices and the whole reason Bill is so desperate to break out. The apocalypse is a prison as much as a conquest. I point these out not to be pedantic, but because getting them right makes the show better, not worse. The truth is always more interesting than the misremembering. The real defeat, the memory gun, and the sacrifice is far more moving than a tidy prophecy. The real Bill, leashed to consent for most of the run, is far more frightening than a monster who can simply do anything. The real apocalypse, trapped in one small town, is far more poignant than a generic end of the world, because it means the stakes were always these specific people in this specific place. The series rewards precision. It was built by people who cared about exactly what happened and exactly why. And meeting it with the same care is the smallest thing a viewer can offer, and somehow also the largest. So here we are, back at the surface, with the whole strange mass of it beneath us in the dark. We started tonight with a stone triangle in the woods, a villain frozen mid-gesture and slowly being reclaimed by the forest, and we have traveled all the way down and back, through the twist that turned a con man into a hero, the backstory of two brothers who broke each other as boys, the demon and his deals, the memory gun and its terrible mercy, the ciphers hidden in the credits, the prophecy that failed, the apocalypse sealed inside one small town, and the treasure hunt that spilled the whole thing out into the real world. And what strikes me, now that we have laid it all out, is how much of it is about the same handful of things. Time running out, childhood ending, people you love slipping toward the future faster than you can follow. The whole enormous machine of mystery and monster and code was only ever a way of talking about those quiet, ordinary heartbreaks that everyone lives through. That is the thing about Gravity Falls that keeps it alive when so many bigger, longer, louder shows have faded. It ran for only 2 summers, 40 episodes, a small and finite and perfect little thing, and it used every minute of that short life to tell the truth about what it feels like to grow up and let go. It dressed that truth as an adventure so that children could survive hearing it, and it buried the deepest parts in codes so that the ones who were ready could dig them out. And it trusted, always, that its audience was smarter and braver and more capable of real feeling than most entertainment ever assumes. A decade on, people are still decoding it, still rewatching it, still finding the town in the woods and standing next to the statue that fiction left behind. It refused, in the end, to fully finish because the people who love it will not let it, and because it built itself to reward exactly that kind of devotion. If you came here tonight to fall asleep, I hope somewhere in all of this you drifted off, and I hope the town and the twins and the long summer followed you down into whatever you are dreaming. And if you are still awake, still turning it over, that is all right too, because that is what this show was always for. The turning over, the looking closer, the sense that there is one more secret just under the surface if you are willing to stay with it a little longer. The summer ends for everyone eventually. Dipper and Mabel got on the bus and rode home and grew up, the way we all do. And the town went back to forgetting, and the shack changed hands, and 2 old brothers finally sailed away together to chase the things they had spent their whole lives arguing about. It is a goodbye, the whole 2nd season, a long and generous and beautifully made goodbye. And the kindest thing it tells you is that a goodbye does not have to be a tragedy if you got to have the thing at all. Thank you for spending this time with me and for letting a show about a haunted little town keep you company into the night. There is something fitting about falling asleep to a story that is itself about the end of a summer, about holding on and letting go and the strange comfort of knowing that even the best things are supposed to end. Rest well. The statue is still out there in the woods or on its roadside now, waiting for whoever comes looking next. And the codes are still half solved, and the summer is still there anytime you want to go back and live in it again. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.